Assembly Education Committee. Item 1 is apologies. Clerk, are we aware of any other apologies?
So Nicola is going to be delayed and Robin has entered an apology, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, Chairperson's business. Can I inform members that the committee held an informal meeting with the Northern Ireland Teaching Council on examinations and GTCNI and a few other associated matters? Can I refer members to a tabled note on the meeting and ask members if they are content to note and write to the Department of Education regarding the movement of the disclosure and debarring service from the Teachers' Pension Agency to the Department of Education in England and seek assurances regards any impact that would have on operations in Northern Ireland. Agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they're also content to write to the Northern Ireland Teaching Council expressing the committee's thanks to all workers in the education sector? Agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Can I also advise members that suggestions re content reduction for GCSEs were made at the informal meeting and these are tabled for the committee's briefing from SEA. There's also a ministerial statement on the North-South Ministerial Council education sector was submitted to the Assembly yesterday. I refer members to the Minister's statement in tabled papers and check that members are content to note. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Item 3 is draft minutes. Can I refer members to draft minutes of the committee meeting on the 30th of June at page 6 of your meeting packs and seek your agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 4, matters arising. There are no matters arising. Item 5 is correspondence. Can I refer members to page 15, where we have 17 items of correspondence and a summary note at page 17. Can I ask the clerk to speak to the correspondence, please?
Of course, Chair. Item 5.5, members on page 36 and 5.6 on page 53 are responses from AQE and PPTC indicating that they won't be available to brief the committee before recess but are happy to do so after recess. So members, are you content for the committee office to arrange a suitable date for that briefing?
Yeah, thanks, Clerk. Extremely disappointing that they're not available before recess, and would be good to schedule that as early as possible in the new term, notwithstanding the committee stage of integrated education bill for work programme as well. Members content to agree that?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Clerk.
Item 5.7 on page 67 is correspondence from Unison regarding its campaign for universal nutritious free school meals for all children. And attaching correspondence it has sent to the Minister of Education. Unison is suggesting that the committee may wish to invite DE officials to provide a briefing on this issue. Members, what's your view on that correspondence?
Yeah, I think the issue of widening the eligibility for free school meals is an important one. I would certainly be keen to hear from Unison in relation to the campaign and the officials in relation to any scoping that's being done to widen the eligibility for free school meals. Again, I'm conscious this is all subject to for work programme, Clerk, but members content with that in principle or any other views?
Yes, absolutely, Chair. I would agree with that.
Okay.
We can find out a little bit by correspondence about the status of the holiday hunger arrangements and the holiday hunger PMB as well in advance. Okay, thank you, members. Item 5.8 on page 80 is a copy of correspondence from the Committee on the Administration of Justice, and it's about the rights of EU citizens in light of the withdrawal agreement. So members, would you be interested in seeking a briefing on the impacts on school pupils and their families of the withdrawal agreement?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Item 512 on page 87 is a copy of correspondence from the Immigration Advice Service to NICVA regarding international students and the vaccine rollout programme. It seems to me that that's more for the Committee of the Economy members, if you're content that we would refer that on to them.
Okay, agreed.
Thank you. Item 518 in tabled papers is a response from the EA on transition and transport arrangements for special educational needs pupils at St Mary's High School, Brala. So again, that's something that members may wish to take up with the witnesses this morning, but also are you content that we refer that correspondence on to the person who raised it with us?
Yeah, that's in table papers.
It is.
Yeah. Do you know what page it is in table papers?
I've got item 518 on. Let me just see.
519, I think it is. Table papers, page 16. Just know, Pat, you obviously raised this particular issue, and the committee had shared concerns. If you maybe want to take a quick glance at that, just to check there.
Yeah, there's some quite interesting detail in there, actually. Okay, so is that agreed to provide that information to the person who raised the issue? Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps we could include in our correspondence, an obvious request that if that is not to the satisfaction of the correspondent, that they would come back to us.
Okay.
That they are setting out assistance that's being provided to assist with transition for pupils with special educational needs, but it would be good to hear back from the correspondents that they were satisfied with that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Item 519 in table papers is a response from the Minister on GTC-NI, and there are several appended items to that as well. Broadly, the Minister states that while the Department intends to bring forward a bill on the status of GTC-NI, it appears unlikely that would be possible within the remainder of the current Assembly mandate. The committee was also asking for a report on the whistleblower matters, and the Minister has provided correspondence from the Permanent Secretary and the former Permanent Secretary to GTC, setting out the concerns which led to the imposition of special measures, and explaining that it's up to the Chair and the Council to address these issues and determine and demonstrate that they have been addressed. There's also then appended correspondence between former Permanent Secretary Derek Baker and GTC-NI Chair about the whistleblowing complaints which were received and investigated, and it's the Department's view that those should remain singly confidential. Okay.
Clark, that's really concerning. Given the extent of the issues in GTC-NI, would members be content for us to respond to the Minister to ask why a GTC-NI bill will not be possible within the remainder of the current Assembly mandate, and what the impact of failing to bring that legislation forward is on GTC-NI, on governance and support for teachers and child protection. Yeah. Any other members want to come in on that?
No, absolutely, Chair. I mean, the Minister should be given a clear explanation as to why this legislation can't progress.
Okay.
Content to respond in that regard, Alvin? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, there's the review on governance issues is going to be reporting to the Minister at the end of the summer. So the committee had already provisionally, decided to schedule a briefing after that. Okay.
I think that would be important. Thanks, Clark.
Yeah. Okay. Then, there's just one last tabled as well is correspondence from Claire Flowers, stating, as we requested, the assistance that Girl Guiding Ulster and the uniform voluntary organisations are in need of. So, I mean, we could forward that to the department if members are minded to ask for attention or assistance to the voluntary outdoor centres. really because they're reliant on residential stays to run their funded activities. That's causing difficulties for them at the moment.
Happy to agree with that.
Okay.
I noticed, Clark, that it also makes some reference to the strategy to prevent violence against girls and young women and mental health as well. So perhaps we could give you authorisation to forward that to any other relevant departments as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Committee for Justice and the Women's Caucus at the very least. Thank you. So, other than that, members, if you're content, the correspondence will be disposed of as per the summary note at page 17.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks, members.
Thanks, Clark. Item 6 is the Integrated Education Bill. Can I refer members to a note from the committee clerk on the committee stage of the Integrated Education Bill at page 485. Draft timeline for the committee stage at 487. Draft call for evidence 489. Draft public notice 490. Draft list of stakeholders to be contacted directly on the bill at 491. A record of an informal meeting with the bill proposer on the 22nd of June at 493. Copies of the bill and explanatory and financial memorandum was introduced at 495-504, and it tabled items a set of questions on the bill for stakeholders answering the call for evidence. Can I seek the committee's view on the draft timeline for completion of the bill, the call for evidence and the public notice? Clark, do you want to make any brief comments in relation to those items?
Yeah, I mean, just broadly, members, the committee stage is 30 working days, and it begins today because second stage was passed yesterday. So 30 working days from today is the 12th of October. I do expect that the committee will want to ask for an extension of committee stage before the 12th of October, but I expect that the committee should have time to finish up its work on this bill by mid to end November.
Okay.
Could I come in there?
Yes, Pat, go ahead.
Just in the light of the debate yesterday and some of the concerns that were raised about consultation, I think it would be sensible to extend the end date for the call for evidence, given that it's going to be happening over the summer. Many teachers and people involved in the sector will be looking forward to a well-deserved break. I think it would be wise, given the controversy that arose yesterday, to extend that call for evidence. And I'd be interested to hear what other members think on that.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, from a logistical point of view, sorry, that the hosting of the citizen-based platform is going to swap after the 10th of September. So our bill will go through on the current platform, and then other bills will have to go through on a new platform. So there might be a hiatus there. It's just from a practical point of view.
Thanks, Clark. Before bringing other members in, Pat, obviously just to say as well, obviously we can take oral evidence after that date as well, but bring other members in.
Yeah, Chair, can I come in there, please?
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about this over the course of the last few days, and I've been looking in detail at the schedule for the committee to effectively and efficiently scrutinise this bill, which it will need. I do have concerns even at this stage that the consultation period, in my opinion, could be largely determined as being out of date, given that it is over 4 years old. It's 2017 when those consultations were carried out. It is now 2021. Also, I have concerns with the consultation has largely been disputed now by CSSC and CCMS, and that is going to have to be addressed in the work of this committee in order to ensure that we have sufficient engagement with other key stakeholders. Another thing I'm concerned about is there doesn't seem to be any place, and this is probably at the discretion of our committee, no place for consulting with schools or the wider general public in relation to concerns that may be had in relation to what this bill proposes in the current form. I don't think that's sufficient. And also, a little time to hear stakeholders and briefings. And I made a couple of notes by looking at the time frame where we're at. So there's only 3 sessions set aside that will have to be released. There's also, on the days that there are 3 sessions set aside, they're action-packed days. There's quite a lot of other major items on the work agenda which would distract us from what effectively we should be scrutinising, which is this bill. For instance, if members look at the 22nd of September, the 6th of October and the 20th of October, there's quite a lot of other items on the agenda, and I really think that the committee should be solely focusing on that particular item, given what's at stake. The final thing there is there's only one session that I consider the written submission, and there's also 2 other items that day as well. So I think we need to diary up a bit to ensure maximum scrutiny of this bill to ensure we cover every potential avenue on it. There is going to be quite a lot of holders affected directly as a result of it, and I would like to ensure that we have as broad a consultation as possible.
Okay, you broke up a fair bit there, Daniel, but I think I caught most of what you were saying. And obviously the call for evidence, Clark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a full public call for evidence. That's the full public consultation for anyone across any sector and across the public to engage with the committee on that, and that's to which Pat refers in terms of the timescale for that. In terms of other items that are scheduled during that time, Daniel, that's the nature of committee stage of legislation. It will require adjustments in forward work programmes. Is that accurate as well, Clark?
Yeah, and I mean, this session is, this conversation now gives me a steer for how much time you wanted to devote to this and how, I can review the forward work programme and the existing issues in it. So I can certainly take out a lot of those.
Okay. Do you have any specific points in terms of, I think, at the moment, the call for evidence scheduled to close on September the 10th, and the clerk, I think, has set out a very reasonable timescale of mid-November for the close of the process, which is more than 2 months. Have you any specific comments in that regard, Daniel?
I just want to ensure that we have sufficient time to give this the maximum that it does. Also, that the keys that are affected would deserve and expect as well. So whilst I appreciate the clerk offering that date, I still believe, given the nature of the bill and what's on the table, that date should be cancelled, and there should be regular room to move it even further if necessary.
Okay. I mean, those of us who attended the Bill's office briefing in relation to this were clear in their emphasis. Committees will never feel like they have enough time to scrutinise a bill. That's the nature of legislation as well. But appreciate those comments. Anyone else want to come in?
Just one last clarification from Alvin, if it's all right, Chair. The one that's call for evidence closes on the 10th of September, okay? And then the committee consider submissions and finalise that. Our call for evidence, is that likely, are we asking for that from today then? Is that?
Yeah, it will go out on Friday of this week, and it will include that list of, so it'll direct people to the Citizen Space platform, which will have that list of questions that's tabled today, which you can see allows people to comment on the principles of the bill broadly, the policy objectives, and then individually on each clause and how it goes about attaining the policy objectives. There's also a stakeholder list in your pack, and members can add to that if there are additional specific stakeholders that the committee wants to target. But as the chair said, it is a general call for evidence that's going out on Friday.
The stakeholder list is at 491. It's fairly extensive. 491 of your actual packs. Justin?
Sure, can I just second what Pat has said, and just from my own experience, we've consulted with the public widely on a number of education issues, but see, once summer recess comes, you don't get the responsiveness that you would get during term time. I'm just concerned, like Pat has said, the call for evidence closing at that time and running through the summer period. I'm really, really concerned about the amount of evidence being returned. And as Daniel has said, we do need to scrutinise this very, very closely as a committee, and we need to dedicate as much time as possible. It's such an important bill to be brought forward, and there are major challenges. Sorry, not challenges. There are clarifications that need to be brought before us all, which we need to find, to interrogate that committee. So I'm just conscious that we need to be wary of this being rushed through because it's such important legislation. So we need to make sure that it is scrutinised to the level that it needs to be scrutinised. And I feel so strongly about that, and CCMS must be engaged as part of that process.
Absolutely. Obviously, the Education Committee survey on post-primary transfer took place during last summer. The committee agreed that and had a wholesome response to that particular piece of work. I appreciate we're perhaps not dealing in ideal circumstances here, but I say again, the Bill's office was very clear that committees will never feel like they're dealing in ideal timelines in terms of committee stages, which are, without extension, scheduled for 30 working days. And this is a 2-month call for evidence and a 2-month schedule for oral evidence. Is that accurate, Clark?
Yeah.
Chair, and could I just come back in again there? Sorry, Justin, did you want to?
No, I think that you're probably going to follow up with the same issue which I'm concerned about, which is that summer period where people are off. They've had a really tough time. Educators have had a really tough 2 years, and for them to engage the level they need to engage at for this, I think that's maybe a little bit unreasonable for them to do so during the summer period.
Yeah. And I would accept what Justin says, given that he comes from a teaching family and he would have knowledge of that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I was asking even earlier about the timeline. And it does appear that we have sufficient time in the event of any slippage. So, I mean, I accept it might mess the timetable up a bit, but there's certainly enough time. I was concerned initially that there was a very tight schedule in terms of getting this through, but we have enough time. So, I mean, there were some. It did get a bit hot and heavy yesterday about the level of consultation and the belief that some people weren't consulted properly and weren't spoken to recently. So, I mean, in order to allay those fears, I mean, I see no cogent reason why we shouldn't extend the timeline for the call for evidence, and I would support Justin on that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Chair.
Sorry, Daniel, if you could just indicate when you want to come in, thanks.
Yeah,
Daniel, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to supplement that, in terms of the consultation period, I do have concerns because the consultation goes out this week for the call for evidence, basically, and schools are already closed. The date is the 10th of September, which leaves insufficient time for schools. Now, this committee have been hugely critical of the Department for Education and the Education Authority for allowing insufficient time for schools to respond to anything they send out. I don't want the same criticism of this committee because we're very aware of the frustration that causes in schools. And for that reason, out of complete respect to schools, and they will be absolutely a big player in responding to this, that deadline of the 10th of September absolutely needs to be widened.
Okay, so again, for points of clarification, this Education Committee conducted a public survey during the summer months last year. Okay, I'm just going to put this on the record. It was responded to by 8,500 people. Okay, many teachers. Would have been more teachers if the Minister for Education had have permitted us to send it to every teacher via the C2K network. Regrettably, didn't. And that gave us a rich and a timely set of information to inform our deliberations in relation to that particular issue. The consultation on the Integrated Education Bill was 12 weeks long. It had 800 responses and it engaged with CSSC and CCMS. As far as I'm aware, CSSC and CCMS are operational over the summer. But if people, and we have the complication that I was unaware of until today that Clark has raised in relation to the platform that would be used in relation to this. But I am a single member of this committee. So what is the specific proposal in relation to the call for evidence and how that would impact or otherwise upon the timescale present for the committee? As I say, at the moment, that is a 2-month call for evidence and a 2-month, if not slightly longer, committee stage, when the statutory stage for committee stage without extension is 30 working days.
Chair, can I just say I share Daniel's views there totally and made a lot of sense, I thought, but that's just where I'd be at too, without going over it all again. Thank you.
Trying to establish what those views are so we can get specific
Can we put it to a vote,
proposals.
Chair? Sorry, can we just put it to a vote?
What are you voting on, Justin? What are you voting on?
Extending the call for evidence.
To when?
Let's go, Daniel.
I think, Justin, it needs to be late October, November.
That's ridiculous, Daniel. Absolutely ridiculous. Are you trying to kill this bill by other means now?
Chair, this is personal. We are a scrutiny authority of legislation. We need to be looking at this in great detail. I understand your party have an attachment to this bill, but we need to ensure that all of the key stakeholders are listened to and engaged with. The consultation is 4-year-old. This is a bill. This is law. It's legislation. It's transformational, and we need to be broad in our engagement with key stakeholders that this affects, and it affects quite a lot of people. I don't believe that September is sufficient. I don't even believe, to be totally honest, that early or mid-October is sufficient. We need to ensure that we give people ample room and opportunity to engage effectively, and schools are currently closed when this actually goes out.
Which was the same case for the committee survey last summer. Okay, so what's the proposal, Daniel?
Survey is a survey. This is law now, and we're scrutinising it. And
okay, what's your proposal?
Member of this committee. My proposal to this committee is that we extend until the end of October.
So a 4-month call for evidence?
Well, Chair, you can't include...
The clerk is trying to come in.
Chair, you can't include the summer when schools are closed, with respect.
I mean, that is not an actual precedent in relation to consultation, but I accept that's what you're putting forward, Daniel. Clark, did I see you wanted to come in there? But I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say that given the transition between these platforms and the fact that we're going into assembly recess, if the start date is not this Friday because the alternative platform won't have been started out, then perhaps the proposal needs to centre on the length of time that the committee wants the call for evidence to last, rather than the date. So the call might go out at some other time in the summer.
Have we not agreed that the call for evidence issues on the 10th of July?
We have, on the basis that it would complete then on the 10th of September on the current platform.
Okay.
But if we miss the current platform, then a new platform will have to be set up and the issue won't be immediate.
And so it's just so I clearly understand this, Clark. So the issue is that the current platform, that there's some concern or that the current platform cannot extend beyond the 10th of September. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Can I come in here, Chair? Yeah, so I think, I know we shouldn't, but we're sort of, I got caught up in a wee bit of social media last night, and I was watching where some of this debate seemed to be feeling like it was going. I don't believe that anybody is looking to kill the bill. I think there is a reasonable point here to be made. I think perhaps to extend it to the point that Daniel is maybe just there might be good rationale, and I think there's a halfway house here. I do see rationale here, and I'm putting my commission hat on, and I'm thinking about Justin's point about educators and those people that are working there and working through COVID and those issues. I think to go out now, it might just put them under a little bit of pressure at this stage. I think if it is to go out maybe in a couple of weeks' time, I think that's fair, because educators do return to work in early August. They don't return at the end of August, to be fair, and they've got preparations to make, whether that be through the departments and so on. So I think maybe if there was a couple of weeks on it, I think a halfway house here would be fair. But I want to kill this because I did not like what I was reading, and there was parties pitting themselves against each other, and it was quite kind of gross. There was really good comments made on this bill. This is a good bill, but it does need to be changed. We will put our shoulder to the wheel with regard to making sure it is a good bill. and that's what this committee will do. I think that some of the tone was unhelpful from some political figures last night, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't engage. And if anybody thinks they're going to accuse me, and not you, Chair, by the way, not you at all.
Robbie, I'm completely unaware of genuinely completely unaware of what you're referring to, so I can't really comment. Sorry.
No, not fair, Chair. I just want to make sure it's nothing to do with you. It really isn't. I think this could be a good bill. I said it last night and I'm saying it today. But I think, to be fair, I'm very aware from the completions perspective in terms of the people that throughout COVID have had their shoulder to the wheel. I think a couple of weeks to put this in, maybe we and take Even's lead in this. If this was to be then instead of this Friday, then perhaps if this was towards the end of July, maybe that this went out to call for evidence for the start of August, and then factor that into the date for completion. So maybe instead of the 10th of September, it brings it forward to either the end of September, start of October. And that certainly gives those people that are going to be asked to provide evidence that little window of opportunity to get a few weeks break. Because when this is a very important subject, a lot of people, if this goes out this week, it's going to put those people under pressure, but I accept the need to do it, Chair. So I think we just the tone we're bringing back in here. I think we will do this.
Okay, so obviously the committee has agreed to call for evidence for the 10th of July. Then there's maybe two separate issues here. Then there's the start date and the end date. I'm not sure changing the start date is materially changes the pressure or the time people have under which to respond to it. So I don't see why we would change that. However, and there is a complication with the current platform. There's obviously a mood to extend the call for evidence, although no one spoke to me about that in advance of the meeting today, which might have been helpful, given my availability to everyone. Clark, is there a way for us to proceed with the call for evidence and extend on a different platform from the 10th of September to the end of September?
Yes, Chair. If the committee is content that a call for evidence should be of 2 months' duration and not in July, then we will endeavour to put out the call for evidence at the end of July, and the members will have the responses back at the end of September.
Can we? I'm trying to find some sort of reasonable extension and end date to call for evidence. I'm just to seek clarification, Clark. I'm not sure why we would have to change the start date if there are people who are in a position to respond. Why would we curtail the start date, given that second stage is passed and that the working days on the committee stage of the bill has commenced? I'm happy to hear from other members, but practically speaking, Clark, just to check. The call for evidence could be started on the 10th of July and extended to the end of September.
Practically speaking, that's something that I can't guarantee just now. I would have the end period would have to be negotiated with the current host of the platform. That's the only reason I can't completely confirm that just now.
Okay. Well, I mean, can I check in with members that can I try and get some consensus that changing the start date? I don't understand the rationale for changing the start date. There's obviously a mood to change the end date, and I'm trying to seek a consensus around the end of September for that. Who wants to come in? Robbie wanted to come in first, and then Daniel.
So the reason I suggested that was because listening to the clerk, that was the easiest way of actually changing the end date. So we could agree now that if we moved the start date, it naturally changes. It gives people a little bit more space. It changes the end date. By doing one thing and agreeing one thing, we get both. That's all it was. As the clerk said, it's harder to do it the other way.
Okay. And does that get us beyond the issue of the change of platform, Clark?
If we were to go out in July and come back at the end of September, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, we expect to have the new platform up and running in time to go out at the end of July.
Okay, so just to try and get us towards a proposal then, happy to bring other members in as well and other views. What are those dates you're discussing there then, Clark?
The end of July, Chair, and the end of September.
Okay. Robbie, you content with that?
Yeah, Friday, is it a Friday then, evening? So it was a Friday.
Friday the 30th, for instance. Yeah.
I propose that, Chair, and then...
Okay. Any other members want to come in? Conscious that our timescales for the meeting today are now out the window. Go ahead.
Yeah. Chair, I'm indifferent in relation to the actual start date, but I do recognise the issue with the date, and certainly the 10th of September is a no-go. I think most members are probably in that place. But I don't believe that the end of September is going to be sufficient. I think that there is some wriggle room in the middle of October, even the 10th of October, which gives a month. I'd be more content there than the end of September.
When you say a month from what date?
A month of an extension from the original date of the 10th of September, if that was moved to the 10th of October.
Okay, despite September giving a full 30 working days outside of July and August?
Yes and no, Chair, but I just recognise that there's quite a lot of people that are wanting to engage in this process.
Okay, we'd originally scheduled 2 months apart for the actual oral evidence stage and deliberation stages. So
Chair, could I just come in there?
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, and again, I'm sort of agnostic on the start date. I think whatever easiest for officials to deal with is probably what we should aim for. But I agree with Daniel that it's the finish date that we should focus on. And I tend to agree with Daniel, and around the middle of October would probably be a good date, and I would tend to support that 10th of October that Daniel has proposed.
Just to be clear, members, you can say what you want about your intentions here. September, we had originally set aside September, October. Clark, you can bring some fact to this for me. September, October, mid-November for the stage after call for evidence. Yeah. Okay. So 2.5 months. Okay. So what you're proposing mid-October, Daniel?
10th of October, Chair.
Mid-October. And then are you proposing that we have 2.5 months as we were trying to have for actual substantive consideration and oral evidence after that?
Yeah, Chair. What I'm proposing is to ensure that all key stakeholders have the opportunity to properly participate in this. This is transformational. It affects directly a number of sectors in a very big way, and it also affects all of our schools. So it's very important that they have sufficient time. And I think the 10th of October is the key, in my opinion. Now that's you I might not agree on that, but that's my proposal to the committee.
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing at this moment in time, and the rhetoric is clear. I support the principles of what you're saying. We need to try and find a way to facilitate that in a way that will actually allow that to happen. So October 10th, 1 month takes you to November, 1 month after that takes you to December, and then you're into the Christmas holidays. So we could be looking at completing committee stage in January on your schedule, Daniel, which would present an extreme likelihood of the bill not passing through stages of the Assembly.
Chair, with respect, I can understand what you're saying, but we need to ensure that this committee effectively and fully scrutinises this bill. That is what my objective is, nothing else. There's quite a lot of other sectors in education and schools that are directly affected as a result. We cannot simply squash things into timeframes because it's convenient to do so. We need to ensure that we maximise our scrutiny role as members of this committee.
There's nothing about convenience here, Daniel. I'm just checking you're aware that this timescale makes it highly unlikely that the bill will return back for the Assembly stages.
Chair, I can't speculate around that. What I can ensure is that the people that want to engage in this process will have ample opportunity to do so by extending the date to the 10th of October.
Okay. Robbie, you want to come in?
Yeah, please. Could I maybe get Alvin to speak in here with regard to the next stages after committee stage in terms of because we've seen a number of albeit executive legislation was going through, pieces of legislation going through recently, and they haven't taken a whole lot of time. So I think that both points are well made, and if it is our ambition to get this bill through in the mandate, what is the squeeze on the other side, Irving, with regard to those, what needs to happen after committee stage? Could you project a time scale for the final stages?
I can't project a timescale because there are so many factors. I mean, there's a lot of executive legislation coming. There's a lot of other private members' bills coming through, and those will all be competing for plenary time in the House. So,
what are the statutory timeframes between each? So, if there was no other legislation, what's the minimum?
Standard Orders provides just 5 days between stages, a minimum, and normally there's a fortnight to allow amendments to be tabled for each amending stage, and then it can, sometimes final stage can be very quick then after the amending stage if there aren't any problems with that. But yeah, there's a lot of material coming to the House at the same time. Robbie,
I have one myself. I'm aware. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Diane, I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, no, just to say, first of all, apologies. I just could not get on, and I really had to download Starleaf and everything. That is a very big challenge for someone like me. So I just caught the end of that around the call for evidence. Obviously, to call for evidence in the middle of July in the education sector is a problem. I mean, I think we all recognise that is an issue. Yet I agree with Daniel that this is a bill that will have far-reaching implications across all of the sectors in education. So I would support the idea that we allow the evidence call to go to about the middle of October, and then have time to consider and scrutinise. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Okay, Irving, so the proposal is that the call for evidence deadline be changed to October the 10th. Is that clear?
Yes, and either way, regardless of the platform, regardless of the issue date, then
checking with the members there in terms of what the proposal is for the extension of the call for evidence. Daniel, is he proposing October the 10th?
Yes, Chair. My proposal to the committee is October the 10th to ensure ample opportunity for all stakeholders to engage with this process. Okay, and then Clark, what would that mean for how does that change the draft timeline for committee stage that you have presented today?
We can do the other business before the 10th of October and then exclusively do committee stage after that, Chair.
Okay, do you, the draft timeline is at page 487 of our normal packs. Yeah. Let's see. Draft timeline. Okay. So it was scheduled then for the 30th of November, working off the 10th of December. Okay, so that would all just be forecast approximately 30 days then, yeah?
Yeah. I'll have to work out the 30 days again from the new date, Chair, and I'll advise the committee in writing about that, okay?
Okay, do you need any other decisions, Clark, other than the extension of the call for evidence to the 10th of October?
Just to know that members are content with that list of questions for stakeholders, so quite generic. And also, do members want to add any stakeholders to the stakeholder list to target? There was the previous forum wasn't on it, for instance. Don't know if anyone has any other suggestions.
Okay, the list of questions is at page... what page is that, Clark?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Do you need those today, or is that something that you probably need those today? Yeah.
No, they're quite generic. It was just to have somebody sign up to them. Yeah, and the list of questions are tabled. Yeah.
Okay. Any other decisions necessary, Clark, on item 6? No? Okay, so members content to agree extension of the call for evidence to the 10th of October?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed?
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, thanks for that, members. Agenda item 7 is forward work programme. Can I refer members to the draft forward work programme at page 268 and ask the clerk to speak to the forward work programme?
Members, given the change to the committee stage arrangements, I will revise the forward work programme and return to you in correspondence on that, if that's okay.
Okay, members. Agreed. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, members, we move to agenda item 8. We now have an hour and 50 minutes for 2 substantive briefings with the Department of Education and the Education Authority on area planning and SEA on the post-results service. I'm going to have to keep us to the strictest of timescales here, and I'm going to need members to bear with me in that regard. Can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove all members from the spotlight and to add our witnesses for the oral briefing from the Department of Education and the Education Authority on area planning? Can I refer members to a briefing paper from the committee clerk in tabled papers and a briefing paper on area planning at page 518? Can I welcome Janice Scallon, the Director of Sustainable Schools Policy and Planning at the Department of Education, Michelle Courtney, the Director of Education at the Education Authority, and Michael McConkey, the Head of Community Planning and Community and Schools at the Education Authority, Jerry Campbell, Chief Executive of the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools. Guests, can I offer my sincere apologies for the timescales that have changed, and give our sincere thanks for the time that you've given to us today on this important matter of area planning. Have 10 minutes, as always, available to you for an opening statement, and I will then share concise questions to you thereafter. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check? I had asked in lieu of an opening statement that we could give a presentation today. I felt it was important, just given that we haven't been at committee for quite some time on area planning, and I thought it was important to set the context. So if Clark could share the presentation on screen, and I'll try and keep to 10 minutes, but it might take 15 just to go through as quickly as I can.
Thank you. Thanks, Janice.
Okay. I can't hear you, Clark. It's just to say, I'll let you work out how to do that, and I'll go ahead and start just by way of introduction. So thank you to the committee, thank you Chair for the opportunity to give evidence to committee today. I'm joined by my colleague Lorraine Finlay from Sustainable Schools Policy and Planning Director at DE, Michelle Corky, Director of Education in the Education Authority, and Jerry Campbell, the Chief Executive of CCMS. I thought it would be useful, as I said, rather than giving an opening statement, that I give a presentation to committee members on area planning, the underpinning policy, an overview of structures and mechanisms for area planning, and some key statistics over the past number of years in terms of our school system and the changes brought about by area planning. I'll also present agility projects underway and anticipated, and finish up with a forward look as we prepare for the next strategic area plan. Can you see the slides? Because I can't. So
they're up now.
There we go.
Coming now, Janice, thanks.
Okay, great. Can we move? It's very Chris Whitty. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So area planning is underpinned by Schools for the Future, often referred to as a Sustainable Schools Policy. And the key aim of area planning is to ensure that all pupils have access to a high quality education that meets their needs in schools that are educationally and financially viable. The SSP sets out 6 overarching criteria which together give an overview of what sustainability means for areas and for primary and post-primary schools. And the 6 criteria which you can see in front of you are each underpinned by multiple indicators. There's often a myth perpetuated that area planning is about closing schools. This is not the case. As you can see, the Sustainable Schools Policy is not a financial policy, but is much wider than that. Next slide, please. I thought I should take some time then just to outline the many stakeholders involved in area planning, and as you can see, it's a widely represented group of organisations, each with their own respective roles in area planning. The department are responsible for setting policy, creating and publishing guidance, as well as scrutiny of the area plan and its associated action plans. Just to clarify, an area plan is a multi-year plan produced by the Education Authority in conjunction with CCMS and all sectoral support bodies. The current area plan originally covered 2017 to 2020, but has been extended to cover the period up to and including August 22. This area plan is on the Education Authority website and has been accompanied by a series of action plans, and the latest action plan covers the period up to and including August 22. There are 3 support structures within an area planning: the Area Planning Steering Group, which provides strategic direction and oversight; the Area Planning Working Group, to produce action plans and monitor operations; an Area Planning Local Group, to produce local solutions for planning at a grassroots level. The department chairs the Area Planning Steering Group, and the Education Authority is the lead planning authority and chairs APWG and APLG at an operational level. CCMS has a subsidiary planning role and represents the Catholic maintained sector. And the other bodies at the bottom of the slide, sorry, could you bring the next slide up, please? The other bodies at the bottom of the slide represent all other bodies involved and all other sectors involved in area planning. So we have TRC, the Transferors Representative Council, for church schools representing the largest Protestant churches; NICE for integrated schools; SENA-G for Irish medium schools; CSSC for controlled schools; the Governing Bodies Association for voluntary grammar schools; and the Catholic Schools Trustees Service for Catholic trustees. All bodies work collectively at a strategic level and also at operational levels to give effect to area planning, planning for their sectors and delivering on the aims of the Sustainable Schools Policy. Can we move on 2 slides, please? Can the clerk hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's actually the assistant clerk who is managing the slides,
Okay.
Janice. So,
okay.
Yeah.
We can move on. It's just the visuals are kind of important as I'm talking through, otherwise I'll just bore people. So the slide on development proposals, if we could bring that up, please.
I think that he may have frozen.
Right, okay. Well,
talk through
and hopefully the visuals will follow.
Yeah, thanks.
So in terms of development proposals, these are the means through which the provision in an area is shaped to deliver the strategic vision outlined in the area plan. It's underpinned by a number of legislative articles, which I'll not go into the detail, but certainly feel free to ask. But primarily Article 14 gives cover for a development proposal to be brought forward for a grant-aided school, to establish a new school, to amend the status of an existing grant-aided school, to discontinue an existing grant-aided school, to discontinue or to make any other change in a school which would have a significant effect on another grant-aided school. The department has a duty under Article 64 of the Education 89 order to encourage and facilitate the development of integrated education, and a duty under the Article 89 of the Education 98 order to encourage and facilitate the development of Irish medium education. And then the Shared Education Act also places a duty on the department to encourage, facilitate and promote shared education. The timeline presented in the visual that you can't see shows the path for development proposals, so I'll just talk you through. The need is first identified that something needs to change in an area. After that, then significant changes that are required are brought forward by means of a development proposal by the relevant proposer. The Education Authority will then conduct a pre-publication consultation, and then we move to a statutory objection period. It's at that point that the department become involved, and that statutory objection period is 2 months. What I will say at this point is the 2-month period for the statutory objection period. If you're aware, area planning was stood down during the COVID-19 pandemic to allow my team and other officials to respond to the pandemic. When we stood area planning back up, we acknowledged the break of 6 months that people had had while area planning was stood down, and we gave the full 2-month statutory objection at the other end. We also extend statutory objection periods over the summer in the full acknowledgement that schools are off and taking a well-earned break after a long and hard academic year. So in order to get the widest possible consultation, we will extend any statutory objection periods by the summer, Christmas, Easter, midterms and so on. So just thought it was important to point that out. Once the statutory objection period is over, at that stage anyone can bring forward objections, letters of support, call for meetings into the department. When the statutory objection period is over, the department then take all salient evidence, all evidence brought through the objections or letters of support, evidence from our policy colleagues across the department, and any other evidence that comes in during that period. We pull that all together and bring a submission of advice to Minister. The Minister is the ultimate decision taker on all development proposals, and once a decision is made, it is then legally binding, so it must be implemented. So the proposers are set out in our development proposal guidance for that reason. The proposer must be able to implement the proposal if agreed. There is no means of appeal mechanism for DP decisions other than by way of judicial review. And just to give you a bit of an overview, very high level, happy to take questions. Since 2017, we've had a total of 124 development proposals with decisions. In the controlled sector, we've had 34. In the Catholic maintained sector, we've had 39. In the integrated sector, we've had 31. 13 in the Irish medium and other maintained sector, and 7 from voluntary grammar schools. And I'm happy to take any questions on that one. If we can move to the next slide then. This is just to give you a quick overview of our current system and the schools that we have, the level of enrolments and the number of settings that we have. So I won't dwell on this. If we can move forward to the next slide, just I want to spend a bit of time on the 10-year history. There are many trends which I could have chosen to present today, but I thought these were important as data move in herds. So these indicators are perhaps best when looking at area planning and the sustainability of our schools. Firstly, the number of available places, often referred to as empty desks or surplus places, is something which is often focused on in the media, and indeed was a recommendation from various audit reports that the department should address the number of available places in schools. One thing to clarify though is that available places are not funded. Children are funded, not places. Nonetheless, you can see from the chart that the number of available places in our schools has decreased substantially, from almost 84,500 to just over 52,500, representing a reduction of 38% over the past 10 years. In primary schools, this was a reduction of 42%, and in post-primary, a reduction of 21%. The flexibility thresholds across the system should be around 10%, so there's still work to be done in reducing the number of available places across our schools. I'll come to that later in the presentation. In terms of enrolments then, the minimum enrolment for a primary school is 140 in an urban area, 105 in a rural area, while for a post-primary school the minimum recommended enrolment is 500 for years 8 to 12 and 100 in sixth form. The reason enrolment thresholds are important for sustainability is that the smaller the school, the more acute problems can become in terms of providing a broad and balanced curriculum. ETI advises that ideally a primary school should have 7 classrooms, 1 for each year group, and this equates to an optimum enrolment of 210 for single intake, 420 for double intake and so on. The figures here look at schools which do not meet the aforementioned minimum thresholds. I mentioned earlier that data move in herds, and while stable enrolment trends is only one of 6 SSP criteria, it's nonetheless a central figure for an individual school's educational and financial viability. Small school size may appear to have certain advantages, however, in terms of personal attention and focus on individual pupils. But small schools may struggle with a range of challenges, including the demands on staff in producing a differentiated programme for classes with mixed age groups, or ensuring adequate SEN provision and ensuring substitute covers for teachers. There may also be higher administrative burden on teachers, including teaching principals, leaving them less time for the preparation of lessons. And children who are taught in composite classes of 3-year groups or more may not have access to the full educational experience or to appropriate opportunities for peer interaction. It's for these reasons I've chosen to look at the number of schools falling under the recommended minimum enrolment thresholds. We've seen some really positive trends in the number of unsustainable primary schools over the last 10 years, a reduction from 341 primary schools to 237 primary schools. There is, however, more work to be done in this area, as we still have almost 30% of primary schools which fall beneath the minimum enrolment thresholds. Similarly, in small post-primary schools, there are challenges in providing the broad and balanced range of subjects and specialisms needed to offer effective pathways to further and higher education or training or employment for young people. For most primary schools, and looking at small sixth forms of less than 100 pupils, the trend is more variable, but nonetheless a reduction has been seen in the number of sixth forms failing to meet this threshold. There is more work to be done in this area. We've seen a downward trend in recent years in terms of the number of post-primary schools for years 8 to 12, from a height of 104 schools falling below sustainability thresholds to 74, representing a reduction of 34%. Taken together then, a 36% reduction across all post-primary schools falling below sustainability thresholds has been seen since 2010-11. Bearing in mind what has gone before in terms of enrolment being a driver of sustainability, whether it be finance, professional development of staff, peer-to-peer learning and catering adequately for differentiation in learning for all children. While there is work to be done, trends are moving in the right direction to ensure a better quality of education for all children. In terms of finance, the chart speaks for itself. It's important to emphasise that area planning is not about achieving financial savings, nor is it a policy for the closure of schools. Evidence of the ability to work within a budget allocation is one of 6 criteria by which overall sustainability is assessed, while alternatives to closure are part of area planning considerations. There is a finite budget for education, and the level of unsustainability in the education system means that resources have to be distributed widely to ensure that in small schools every pupil has access to a broad and balanced curriculum. Maintaining schools on an individual level that are unsustainable therefore impacts on all schools across the system. What we've seen though across the system is that in terms of the proportion of schools that are failing to meet minimum enrolment thresholds, this is falling, and that is to be welcomed. If you take the next slide, please. I'll be very quick from here on in, I promise. This slide is really just to show some of the agility projects that we've had the opportunity to work on through the Delivering Schools for the Future Transformation project. And this is about, we recognise that area planning is a complex and sensitive matter, and it can take time to bring schools and communities together in terms of significant changes to schools in local areas. That said, there was an opportunity to explore the potential for agility in area planning through the work of this project. And several key projects have come out of the DSF Schools for the Future project. Resetting for area planning process. This was a voluntary pilot which subsequently became a mandatory exercise, where schools that have a historically very high enrolment but have never filled to the places in a series of 4 out of 5 years, we were able to reduce those enrolments without the need for a development proposal. And in short, this has taken in the voluntary exercise, reduced available places by 4,000, and in the mandatory exercise, over 5,000 available places were removed from 62 primary schools, reset through the process for primary schools. The former minister recently decided to extend the resetting for area planning process to eligible post-primary schools, and that voluntary downsizing is currently underway. We also had an opportunity to explore how area planning should take place for special educational needs, and as a result of the work of the DSF project, we have 2 area planning frameworks, one for special schools and one for specialist provision in mainstream schools, and these are due to be with the department imminently, and the minister will have to endorse those before we can release them. There was also a SEN pilot which looked at the need for development proposals for specialist provision in mainstream schools, and whether this is deemed a significant enough change to warrant a development proposal or not. So again, we have the results of that pilot report, which should be coming to the department very shortly for endorsement by the minister, and it is hoped that this will make provision for children with special educational needs much more agile and much more responsive to the demand that's out there. We've revised area planning guidance and hope to release that shortly, and other guidance that's currently in progress includes a user guide to the Sustainable Schools Policy, bringing this up to date and making it more current in terms of its language. A circular on frameworks for developing schools, which aims to support schools, new schools that have been developed over a 10-year period to ensure that the right support is put into those schools to ensure that they thrive and grow to become sustainable schools. And the Department's development proposal guidance will also be refreshed on foot of the finalised area planning guidance. Next slide, please. We've also produced a sustainability baseline report, and this is being finalised at present and will need approval from the Minister before we can release it. But just to give you an idea, you can read the slide that's up there. You don't need me to talk you through that. But we thought that we're coming to the end of the current area plan in August 22. We're in the pre-planning year for the next strategic area plan, and that's why we've developed this report. It takes existing data and trends on the quantifiable indicators of the Sustainable Schools Policy, and we've examined a 10-year picture. Some of those slides you've seen. This report doesn't cover all criteria in the Sustainable Schools Policy, and in taking a more outcomes-based approach, we've committed to a data development agenda moving forward to explore data for other criteria in the policy. The report's based on analysis at Northern Ireland level, at the macro level, and then provides 11 additional reports, one for each local government district. It's hoped that the evidence will be included in the wider evidence base to underpin the strategic direction of the next area plan, anticipated to commence in September 22, and the data within it will be refreshed with a further year of data when school census data are available. I don't want to preempt what Jerry or Michelle are going to say on the development of the next area plan, but will simply say that this report has developed a long time series presentation of our school system, which should hopefully highlight areas where attention needs to be focused and given to area planning and operational actions needed, as well as giving an overview of the current level of our schools at the macro and meso levels, meeting or not meeting sustainability thresholds, and should help to aid the planning authorities and sectoral support bodies all involved in the production of the next area plan when engaging schools and localities to look at viable area planning solutions for their area. And my last slide then is just to look at the forward work programme. Looking forward for area planning and bearing in mind the next area plan is due to commence in September 22. As I've said, we're currently in the pre-planning year. A timetable for this is underway and will be published very shortly on our website, and it will cover all of the activities leading up to the commencement of the next area plan. In advance of the next area plan, the Department will, in conjunction with all APSG members, update the sustainability baseline report that I've already mentioned, produce revised area planning guidance, update guidance on producing development proposals and the development proposal process, and explore the options for raising and enhancing awareness of area planning by boards of governors through a sustainability checklist, which will allow all schools to be aware of the Sustainable Schools Policy and to ask them to examine their own school in terms of the criteria in the Sustainable Schools Policy and to be aware of any risks of unsustainability. We will continue to take the positives from last year in terms of our newfound abilities to conduct business in a virtual world, embracing technology as an aid to effective consultation and meetings, as well as digital communications going forward in area planning. We've also taken forward and are developing agility processes that I've already mentioned as a result of the DSF project, and these look at non-significant changes to reset or normalise a school's enrolment figure in line with established long-term trends. Thank you for your patience, and I'll end with saying, while there's been a lot of good work done in what is a really complex and sensitive space, there's still much work to be done to explore creative and innovative solutions through area planning, and with collaborative and collective solutions from all of those involved that I outlined in the slide. There are many organisations involved in area planning at all levels. We will continue to work to achieve the aims of the Sustainable Schools Policy, that all children have access to a high quality education in a school which is educationally and financially viable, and we will continue to work collectively to have the right number of schools of the right type and size in the right locations at the right time that have a focus on raising standards. Thank you again for your patience, and I'm going to pass to Michelle and Jerry if they have anything they wish to add to my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Chair, with your permission, I'm going to make a brief statement.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I'll just have to keep our questions extremely concise, but we appreciate the information that you're bringing to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and members. The Education Authority, as you know, has overall operational responsibility for planning of provision within the area planning policy and strategic framework set by the Department of Education. The Education Authority is also the managing authority for all controlled schools. And a key aspect of the Education Authority's overall role since its inception has been to bring together and work in partnership with all other educational partners, the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, Controlled School Support Council, Comhairle na Gaelscoireachta, Governing Bodies Association, Northern Ireland Council for Integrated Education, Catholic Schools Trustee Service, Transferers Representative Council, and the Department for the Economy, representing the further education sector. A key outcome of this has been the harmonisation of area planning practices, improved cooperation and collaboration. During the lifetime of the first strategic area plan, under the leadership of the Education Authority, 32 unsustainable schools have been discontinued, 81 more schools are above the minimum SSP enrolment threshold, there are 25 fewer small primary schools with composite classes of more than 2-year groups, and over 8,000 pupils are now in more educationally viable schools. As the Managing Authority for Controlled Schools and through partnership working with our colleagues in the Controlled Schools Support Council from April 2017, 12 unsustainable controlled schools have been discontinued and 14 controlled schools have increased their admission and enrolment numbers to meet demand. These outcomes demonstrate clearly that the Education Authority has been and will continue to be focused on meeting the needs of children and young people to improve educational outcomes. To make this happen for the most efficient and effective way possible, and to ensure that all pupils are educated in educationally viable schools. Despite the positive outcomes from the first strategic area plan, there is still more to be done, as Janice has outlined. In some areas, there are too many schools for the size of the population, while in other areas, there are not enough places. It may be the case also that there are not even enough school places of the right type. In some areas, there may be a demand for controlled, maintained, integrated or Irish medium education that is currently not being met. Therefore, as we move into the second strategic area plan, the Education Authority affirms its position that the purpose of area planning is to contribute to school improvement. At every stage, the focus of decision making will continue to be related to the needs of children and young people. One of the key challenges for all of us, Chair, is that area planning is not about retaining schools or institutions from a particular sector or tradition, but rather about providing every child and young person with a range of educational experiences which will prepare them fully to contribute to the prosperity of the community in which they live and work. This can only be achieved through a network of viable and sustainable schools that are of the right type, the right size, located in the right place, and have a focus on raising standards. This will continue to be most challenging in our rural communities, which are often served by 2 small primary schools, one under the management of the Education Authority and the other managed by the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools. Both organisations recognise that the closure of such schools can be extremely difficult for the community. Therefore, the next strategic area plan will have a clear focus on engaging communities in a shared exploration about the way forward, to work towards a realistic, sustainable solution by providing further guidance and support to governors and local community leaders to ensure ongoing school provision in these areas where possible. Thank you, Chair, and I hand over to Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just be brief, and good morning to yourself and good morning to the committee. As Janice and Michelle have outlined the key strategic aims and objectives of area planning, its outcomes, the challenges and the future direction, I just want to mention a wee bit about the role that CCMS also plays. CCMS would be a very key partner along with the Department and the Education Authority and our other sectoral colleagues in progressing area planning. And Council supports the view that our education system should provide high quality education for all our young people and that there must be equity of access and opportunity to a broad and balanced curriculum that meets the pupil needs in sustainable schools within a diverse system of education. CCMS also believes that the Catholic and faith-based ethos of our schools in the maintained sector enables a particular focus on the wider holistic development of all of our young people to achieve their full potential and a close link with their wider community and to inform educational opportunities beyond the school setting itself. We have a distinct role within CCMS as a planning authority for 450 maintained nursery, primary, post-primary and special schools. CCMS works very closely with the trustees of Catholic grammar schools to enact and progress the recommendations of their 2012 post-primary schools area plan. And as Michelle and Janice have indicated, since its inception, CCMS has also brought forward a significant number of often very challenging proposals to support the development of a network of sustainable schools providing that high-quality education in line with our stated aim of raising educational standards for all. So since 2013, CCMS has implemented 13 amalgamations, thus bringing forward 13 new schools as a result of 31 schools discontinuing. In addition to this, in this time, CCMS has also brought forward the discontinuance of 16 primary schools and 7 post-primary schools. In total, this has removed almost 10,000 spare places within the system. And alongside this, CCMS has also worked in close collaboration with the trustees of 7 Catholic voluntary grammar schools to remove or reduce the use of academic selection. CCMS recognises that changes to the nature of a school or the provision in a particular area or locality is often very difficult for any community, and we appreciate the challenges that this brings. However, our focus must always be on access to educational choices for the pupils that best meet their individual needs and talents and abilities, and which maximise their opportunities and chances to reach their full potential. We will continue to work with our trustees and our other colleagues right across the educational sector to improve outcomes for all, to sustain strong, successful and viable schools, well led by their governors, principals and staff, and ultimately to uphold an education system that plays a powerful and positive role in the normalising of our society, helping to make it sustainable and vibrant. Finally, we recognise the significant and very challenging issues that principals, governors and our schools have faced over the past year within the COVID-19 pandemic, and we would want to commend our school leaders and the wider school communities for their remarkable efforts to continue to support our pupils and to ensure continuity of learning throughout that period. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for your presentations today. I think we've got about 30 minutes at the absolute maximum here for, I think, 7 members' questions. Members, I think we've less than 4 minutes each. You normally have about 7 or 8, so calculate half of what you normally say and go from that point. This could have been helped by people speaking to me in advance of today to ensure our committee business was better handled. It wasn't. We move on. Apologies for the short nature of the questions. Witnesses, we're extremely grateful for your time today. To start from me, a study in 2017-18 of pairs of schools found that 274 of 817 primary schools, or approximately 34%, were below sustainability thresholds. 32 pairs of primary schools were less than 1 mile apart providing education on a separated basis. 10 schools had fewer than 50 pupils. Some ratios had 1 teacher for 8 pupils and the NI average was 1 teacher for 22. Have we made adequate progress on those figures?
I think, Chair, I'm happy to take that one. I mean, I've outlined there in the presentation the movement that there has been in areas. And as we've all said, Michelle, Jerry and myself have all said that area planning is extremely complex and sensitive. From a strategic point of view, you could look at numbers and go into an area and simply close all small schools. But when you go into a rural community to tell people who are very attached to their school, and the school often has a really long history in that community and really is the centre of the community, that's a really sensitive and emotional discussion to have. So where I'm trying to get to is to get to the point where there are area-based solutions for small areas, for large urban areas, for areas where, as Michelle alluded to, there may be two very small primary schools. And the solution may be that they share, it may be that they collaborate, there may be an innovative solution in that area. It takes time to bring communities and stakeholders into that mix, to have those discussions, to have that important early stage consultation before options are put on the table and anything would ever come into the action plan stage of the area planning cycle. So, you know, I appreciate that a drop may look quite small, but there has been some substantial change over the last 10 years in terms of the reduction of unsustainable schools. But we have more work to do in this area, but that has to be taken in the knowledge that it is a very complex area. It's difficult to go in and talk to communities about removing something or potentially removing something that they have been so attached to for so long, for generations. So I think we have to acknowledge that, and that's why the area planning process can be slow moving, but it is definitely moving in the right direction.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm obviously not wedded or suggesting that a blanket school closure is my proposal to respond to those figures, and you, Janice, allude to innovative area-based solutions, which I think is the way forward. I'd love if I had time to ask you for some examples of such innovative area-based solutions. If you have a quick one, I would ask, because I'm really pushed for time. Do you have any concise examples of where that's taken place?
Well, I think, to be fair, if I could maybe allude to another area of my work, which is the progress of the Shared Education Campuses programme. So we have 4 shared education campuses which bring already sustainable schools together to share. And the first of those projects under my remit would be Limavady, which sees the 2 schools, St Mary's in Limavady and Limavady High School, who are conveniently next door to each other, but they already have a really long history of sharing. So if you go to St Mary's and you decide to do drama, for example, you'll automatically go into Limavady High School to do that subject. So they're building a STEM centre, and it's really positive to see. They've broken ground and we anticipate the building to be up sooner than was expected. So there are absolutely opportunities out there for innovative and creative solutions for schools to come together.
Okay. The independent review of integrated education recommended that a stakeholder engagement strategy for area planning be developed with a specific focus on how planning authorities engage with local communities around innovative, integrated, jointly managed and shared options. Has that been implemented?
Well, I'll go first and then I'll pass to Michelle and Jerry as the statutory planning authorities. What I would say is that as part and parcel of area planning and the development proposal guidance that's out there, and what I am aware that through Area Planning Steering Group that all of our stakeholders in area planning do, is heavy consultation with communities. And sometimes that can take years, just alluding to my last answer to your question, sometimes that can take years in communities, widely consulting. So there is a mechanism for that consultation, and then there are the statutory elements of the consultation, which is the affected schools consultation by EA, and the statutory objection period by the department. So at all levels, from grassroots levels right up to the strategic level, consultation is wide, and options are explored at all of those levels for area solutions. But if I could pass maybe to Michelle and Jerry to talk about that from an operational perspective.
Apologies that I'm pretty much out of time for my questions, so if you could be as concise as possible, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly, Chair. Just to say that yes, our stakeholder engagement is extensive and continues to grow, and throughout the first strategic area plan there were processes that were completed in terms of consultations, but as we move into the second strategic area plan, obviously that stakeholder engagement will now have been enhanced. That's the benefit of COVID, because now we have different processes of consultation and those processes will be enhanced. So as we move forward, it will become more extensive.
Okay. In closing, in terms of special school area planning, obviously a an entire new additional special school was recommended for Belfast in 2012, and in the last area plan, at least one school, Cedar Lodge, was proposed to be extended from 3 to 19 and remains at 16, with associated difficulties experienced this year as a result. In a concise response, are we any closer to delivering a new special school for Belfast and extending provision in schools such as Cedar Lodge from 3 to 19?
Yes, Chair, with your permission, Janice, I'll respond. Obviously, we have had the consultation on the specialist school framework, and that has now given us a basis for developing a 5-year strategic plan specifically for special educational needs, and that gives us the basis to move forward on that. So the short answer, Chris, is yes, and we hope to have the responses are now complete. Consultations have gone to DE. The framework for specialist schools and specialist provision in main schools will be with the department no later than the 9th of July, and will go through the Education Authorities Board on the 5th of August. And obviously we're developing that framework in very close consultation with special school leaders.
Thanks, Michelle. Timescales would be great on that as well. Let me bring in Deputy Chairperson Pat Sheehan for 4 minutes. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all of you this morning. We're seeing again this year that some students still haven't got a placement, yet we're told there are thousands of available places in the system. And area planning was supposed to have dealt with that, yet we see it year after year. And I mean, I presume you're going to say the places aren't available in the right places or in the right sectors. But I mean, area planning was supposed to deal with those issues. So I wonder, could you comment on that? And I'll just give you the second question dealing with Irish medium education. And the proposed changes to the minimum threshold in the Sustainable Schools programme would probably disproportionately impact on the Irish medium sector. And the proposed 10-year period for a school to demonstrate sustainability would also have an impact. If you look historically, only 29% of Irish medium schools would have met that threshold. So again, Irish medium is likely to be disproportionately affected. So I'm wondering, could you comment on both of those questions? Thanks.
Okay, I'm happy enough to take that one, Pat. You've ventured into post-primary transfer, but you've correctly linked it to area planning. So yes, I mean, while at the end of this year's P7 cohort, almost 99% of children were placed, and almost 85% of children were placed in their first preference school. We had 280 children unplaced at the end of the process, so receive a place, and that figure as of yesterday is down to 84. So we're working very closely with colleagues in the Education Authority to ensure that those children are placed as quickly as possible. But you're right, at the end of the process there were around 2,700 places available across the north in our schools. And as I said, the aim of area planning is to have the right number of schools of the right type and the right size in the right location and at the right time. But I would have to preface that as well by saying that, again, area planning is complex. It is almost impossible to make those decisions quickly and overnight. You have to be able to consult at an early stage. There are statutory processes that have to be followed, and the development proposal process can take actually quite a while, but it's that early stage of getting communities engaged and signed up to what significant changes potentially need to take place in their areas to give effect to having the right schools of the right size and the right type at the right time and the right location. So we have temporary variation policy, which allows us through a different piece of legislation to temporarily vary a school's admission or enrolment number for 1 year. And this year, so far, we've put in, up until yesterday, it may have changed again this morning, but we've put in 941 additional places into schools. And we will do that. We've always used temporary variation policy in every year where we see demographic pressure in certain sectors. Once you go down to local community level, the population does vary quite a bit year on year. So we need a solution that we're able to use a temporary variation to school enrolment to meet the demographic pressure in an area. But area planning is strategic planning in the long term, and we have seen, as I've shown today, the direction of travel is going the right way, and I'm quite confident that with the next area plan it will continue to do that, and hopefully at a much quicker pace. In terms of the other questions around sustainability thresholds, there's no plan, certainly at the minute, to change any sustainability thresholds. I think what you might be referring to is the urban and rural definition that we use in the Sustainable Schools Policy. So we have updated that definition in line with what the rest of government and statutory and voluntary organisations use in terms of urban and rural. So what that means is we, at the minute in the Sustainable Schools Policy, Belfast Local Government District, as it was before local government reform, and Derry Local Government District, as it was before local government reform, were deemed urban, and the rest of the 24, as they were, local government districts were deemed rural. Our population has grown. It grows around 10,000 people or 100,000 people every 10 years. So we have to recognise that some of our, what previously might have been deemed rural areas by this policy, have become much more urbanised. So in that respect, we have changed that definition, and that has been approved and will take effect in the next area plan. In terms of those schools, I think you're referring to Irish medium schools that may be disproportionately affected. A couple of things I would say there, and I'll pass to Lorraine on the developing schools work that's being done. Very, very few schools are individually affected. We're into single figures of schools that are individually affected, and there will be a transition period for that change to take effect.
I'm sorry, that's almost 6 minutes here. I am working to the time scale I'm working to today. Apologies. Pat, do you have any real urgent final question you want to ask? I'm just going to be cutting people off left, right and centre here today.
No,
all I can do is apologise. Sorry, folks.
I understand the time constraints, so thanks for that. Thank you.
I can only apologise. Can I bring in Diane? Diane Dodds, MLA, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to all for the presentation. It's absolutely fascinating for someone who is just newly onto the committee. Can I ask, for example, what role the issue around children travelling to suitable places in post-primary schools has in area planning? And I'm thinking particularly of the Lurgan site of Craigavon Senior High School, where children will, if the development proposal is followed through on, will have to travel to the Lurgan site. And whether or not we shouldn't have been looking for a single school in the wider Craigavon area for the whole of the senior high school in any case. So just around the issue of how travel impacts on that whole proposal, and the issue of taking young people out of their very distinct communities to travel to school. The other thing that I'm really interested in pursuing, because I do think that we have a lot of work to do at how we help children to make choices at the age of 14. And you give a very, very good example in Limavady of how schools cooperate and work together and how you can produce something quite special and unique. I actually think that there is an opportunity also to do this in a more expansive basis with the further education sector. And I'd like to know your view on that. And is there any way that that is figured into the area planning?
Diane, if I could maybe just come in first and very quickly, and then I'll pass to colleagues in the Education Authority. In terms of the development proposal for Craigavon Senior High School, the department, it's still under consideration in the department, and you'll appreciate that I can't get drawn into what any decision might be. We need to be able to take all of the evidence that we've got and that's been put in during the statutory objection period in order to bring advice to the Minister. So I can't be drawn in on that one right now. We do have, and in the wider sort of travel times and things, we do have criteria in the Sustainable Schools Policy on the website which do reference reasonable travelling times to schools and things like that. So I think that's all I can say around that one. And I'll pass to EA in a second. In terms of the Department for Economy and Further and Higher Education, yes, I have to apologise. I didn't mention them when I went through that overview slide, but the Department for the Economy are represented at area planning steering groups. So we do work closely with the Department for the Economy, and I agree, I do think there is lots of opportunity there for creative and innovative solutions, particularly for post-16. And I think then obviously the department in the 14 to 19 strategy will be working closely with DFE on that as well. But just in the interest of time, can I pass over to Michelle in case you have anything to add, Michelle?
Thank you, Janice. Yes, Michael would like to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Just in reference to the member's question from Craigavon Senior High School, the Education Authority's proposal and the actual development proposal does reference the need to move to one site, but because of the protocols, we can't access that capital funding until the development proposal decision is actually made. But it was very clearly stated by our EA board members that that is their desire to have Craigavon High School, Senior High School on one site moving forward in new accommodation. And then secondly, just to follow up on Janice's point about FE, obviously inextricably linked in post-primary schools. So for example, recent development proposal for Ballymoney High School for sixth form was linked into the work in the area learning community with the other schools in the area and with FE. And similarly, in work we're taking forward in Coleraine, again, inextricably linked to the other schools in the area through the ALC, but particularly to the university and also to FE College. So yes, we totally agree with the member's comment in relation to the role of FE in area planning.
Diane, I'm sorry, that's time up if you'd like to ask a very concise final question or comment.
No, I'm good. It's a subject I'm going to return to. That's really important. Thank you.
I agree, Dan. Thanks for raising those questions. Appreciated. Can I bring Daniel McCrossan, MLA, in for 4 minutes, please? Thanks. Daniel there, no? Okay, Robbie Butler, MLA, please, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, guys. I've just got 2 questions, so I will be pretty brief. First one is in regards to area planning and the work that is done with local planning. So, for instance, if we give an example, a large-scale development in Lisburn, maybe circa 16 or 600 houses, or actually in the future development plans, perhaps in the region of 1,500 to 2,000 homes. What role does local government planning play in regard? What is the statutory consultation look like for future-proofing the provision of school places when large-scale new builds happen?
I'm happy to start with a response on that one, Robbie. That's a question for the Department for Infrastructure. We look after planning.
Come on, you guys build the schools. You guys build the schools, come on.
In terms of area planning from an educational perspective, we're involved in DE, and indeed the Education Authority and CCMS are statutory planning partners for community planning. Yeah. So we're there in every local government district, and there's a DE director assigned to each local government district for community planning. So conversations take place. From an area planning perspective, we don't operate on a build it and they will come precedent. We can't plan for what's not there. So we don't because there are X amount of houses. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll need a school of this type and this size in this location. We may already have enough places in that area to service a development, but until people move in, we don't know who's going to live there. Is it young families? Is it older people? Is it a mix? Well, we have primary children, preschool children, post-primary children. So it's very difficult to plan in that way. When you're planning for houses, you're building houses of a certain type to accommodate whoever wants to move into them. when you're planning for education, you actually need the children there to see what type of education is needed. So I don't know, Michelle, Jerry, do you want to come in on the back of that?
If I would maybe come in there, Janice, just to go back to Robbie, I think the importance of continual engagement and communication between the education organisations and the community planning teams within the district councils, but also looking at the potential impacts that there might be in existing provision, because we're managing, we talked about in terms of area planning here, the sustainability levels within primary and post-primary schools. So it's ensuring that there's continued engagement with the relevant players on the ground through even the local groups feeding up to the area planning strategic group, because it's just, as Janice explained, it's not just as simple as putting in a school and then hoping that the children will come, but it's having those conversations and seeing where the trends and where the changes are happening and trying to be ahead of the curve. It's not an exact science. It can be very, very challenging. We appreciate that. But maximising that engagement with the relevant statutory partners, even looking outside education, is very important as part of the continuing process.
Okay, I appreciate that, guys. And my question, I kind of unfairly pitched to you guys, because it's not a criticism, by the way, of how you go about it. I think there's something wrong with the area planning and councils with regard to when planning permission is granted for large-scale development, that very often a developer will stick a school in, and there's been no discussion with the department or the education authority as to whether the school is viable, whether it's appropriate, whether the money exists. And it's kind of a sop at times, and it's a false promise. So, but I do think it needs to change, guys. I'm just going to be up front. It needs to change, probably driven by infrastructure. Guys need to be in on it. And I think we can do better with regard to projecting, because we know when we build a certain type of house, certain type of people is going to live in it. We can do that in multiplication. Final question, Michelle, this is for you, just on special education needs. Can you give us any figures with regard to unplaced children for September at this point? And hopefully it's not by many, because there was a few last year, and hopefully we'll not be revisiting that.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks for that, Robbie. Yes, you know we've been very open and transparent about our process this year, and it has been a mammoth task to get all of the children placed, and I'm very happy to report that on the 5th of July this week, we have 98.7% of our children placed at stage 5 of the Code of Practice. And the final 0.1 to 3% are being addressed as we speak. So we find ourselves in a very good place, and we're very confident that September will look very different this year, Robbie.
I hope so. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for the team always being available, and I do hope that everybody gets his place. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Robbie. Michelle, how many pupils are unplaced in special school at this stage for next year?
None.
No.
Sorry, beg your pardon, 4, and it's not that they haven't been placed, they just have to confirm the place. But at this moment in time, Chris, every child has been placed.
Thank you. Can I bring in Nicola Brogan, MLA, please, for 4 minutes? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for your presentation this morning. I was actually a bit late onto the meeting, so I missed the most of it, but so apologies if I'm making you repeat yourself. But I just kind of want to ask, I represent West Tyrone, which is a largely rural constituency. So can you tell me how the objectives, how you meet the objectives of the sustainable school policy and meet rural needs as well?
Can I start, Nicola, and then I'll pass to the planning authorities?
Sure.
Michelle had already said in her opening statement, area planning takes account of the communities in which it's situated at that time. So it's a grassroots project as well. We have strategic area planning, where the chief executives of all of those organisations sit around and strategically look at the area plan. But ultimately, area planning comes from the bottom up. So it is designed locally by local representation of all of those organisations that I outlined in my presentation, who know their local areas best. So planning for rural areas could be slightly different, the conversations taking place, than it would be in urban areas, where you do tend to see less unsustainability in urban areas, but it does take account of rural needs under the Rural Needs Act. So once those local conversations take place to come up with area solutions, they come up through the area planning working group, up through the area planning steering group, and ultimately, if the result is that a development proposal is brought for a change to a school, we then take account of the Rural Needs Act. So the planner, the proposer themselves will take account of the Rural Needs Act and the needs of rural children, and the department will also take account of the Rural Needs Act as we are obliged to under the statutory process. I'll pass to Michelle or Jerry if they have anything else.
Yes, thanks, Janice. I suppose with the Strategic Area Plan in 2015, it was a mechanism for organisations to work together for the first time really on a regional basis, and that's where, Nicola, your question, I suppose, sits. How do you marry the regional requirements with the rural proofing? So as Janice has said, all of the work that we do has a rural needs screening for every single proposal. But what we definitely don't do is engage in a process of slash and burn. It is very strategic in its intent, and as we move into the second strategic area plan, we will be working with local communities to find, as Janice has already said, those innovative solutions to try and to make sure that there's the right school in the right place at the right time for the children who need it.
If I could also add there, Nicola, I think a lot of this goes back to that early engagement that there takes place with local communities, because we can't overemphasise that, because sometimes change can happen over quite a long period of time. But in maintaining that conversation and the engagement and having sometimes the difficult conversations, because the pupil has to be at the centre. And if you look at the 6 criteria within the Sustainable Schools Policy, and ultimately providing a very broad and balanced curriculum offer for pupils and ensuring that they get the best possible education experience to set them up for later in life. But sometimes that does mean having very, very difficult and challenging conversations. That will continue, but we welcome the cooperation of local stakeholders on the ground, whether they be the parents, whether they be folks from the district councils, the schools themselves and other interested parties as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. I think that's key. And Janice, as you said as well, about engaging with locals and being a grassroots kind of issue, and to start from there. I think, as I say, that's key, to be engaging with people on the ground. And it's always so important to remember to kind of reflect rural needs, and I think it can easily be forgotten about. So it's something I will continue to raise as well. But listen, thanks so much for all that there, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola. Can I bring in Justin McNulty, MLA, please, for 4 minutes?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, folks, for your evidence. I'll get right to it here. In terms of area planning for special schools, it seems to be particularly problematic, and there appears to be many that are feeling miserably for a number of years in terms of their intake. And, the area planning process has been discussed at length here. How does that tally with the fact that there are so many special schools who cannot accommodate the numbers who are seeking access to them, and they're having to move to other schools in a temporary arrangement, modular classroom arrangement? How does that tally with good area planning?
Sorry, Janice, I'll take that. Is that okay?
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. I suppose the work, Justin, that we have done in the consultations for the frameworks that we have gone out, and the consultation is just closed, that gives us now a framework to work against, to be much more strategic in the way we address these issues. And we have worked very closely with our special school principals in this space, which is why the consultation was extended twice, actually, to make sure that everybody's voice was heard and that we're all involved in the strategic direction. And the frameworks that we have for special schools and for specialist provision in mainstream gives us a mechanism to work within, where we can make sure children are placed in the appropriate places in schools that are fit to meet the growing complex needs of our children at the moment. Justin.
Okay, well, I know of issues locally here where children who their parents know that they should be in a special school, but because the special school doesn't have the capacity, they have to go to a different school with a temporary arrangement, agreements, and it's just not ideal. And I'm just wondering, how does that sit with the whole area planning framework?
Well, the area planning, sorry, Justin, just to answer your question, the specialist provision framework will move forward at the same time as the strategic area plan for mainstream schools, so there won't be any delay. All of that work will work in tandem so that we can address those issues in a much more strategic way. Okay.
Janice, you mentioned data moves and herds. What was data moves and herds? Tell me what that means.
So if we I'll take a different example, just to take it out of the educational arena. Data, when one piece of data moves, others tend to follow. So that's what I mean when I say data move and herd. So if we look at, if we look at sort of worldwide poverty statistics, reducing infant mortality reduces poverty, in short. So when we look at things like low birth weight, if we focus on that indicator and we can make that better, other data will follow. Long-term outcomes, long-term health, disability rates and things like that will get better. So for area planning, that enrolment threshold and failing to meet that enrolment threshold brings with it a whole raft of other indicators that will follow a trajectory. So if we can't get to an enrolment threshold, it will impact on teacher professional learning, the quality of education, the ability to cater ably and adequately for children with special educational needs, peer-to-peer interaction and learning and cognitive development of children. So really that's a crucial piece of information in area planning for us. It's central, but other data move along behind that indicator. So that's what I meant by data moving here.
That's very, very well explained. In terms of the development process, our development proposal process, I have a very good experience with St John the Baptist, Portadown, or impacting the Kilmore area by Hagan, and the community and school are thrilled with how that moved forward positively for them. In terms of the schools, or the children who are still unplaced for secondary school, 82, I believe, how soon will that be resolved for children and parents, and how many children are you aware of, and families who are really not pleased with the outcome of the transfer process and admissions process?
Thanks, Justin. I mean, as I said, almost 99% of children were placed, and 85% of children placed in their first preference. So we absolutely recognise that not all families receive the news that perhaps they had anticipated or hoped. But I would say the department cannot guarantee any child a place in any individual school. What we do is allow, under legislation, for parents to state their preferences, and to increase the chances of placing a child, a parent needs to put multiple preferences on their form, realistic preferences, preferences where they've looked at the admissions criteria for the schools and ensure that their children can meet those criteria. So there is a whole process. It is a very complex process, and I know perhaps going forward next year, communications could be more detailed and more user-friendly for parents to ensure that they understand the concept of their child's transition to post-primary, and the importance of detailing more than one preference, and the importance of reading admissions criteria, picking the right school based on realistic indicators for your child, and then putting down a range of preferences that aren't all necessarily grammar schools, or, as we say in our guidance, and we do produce a lot of guidance in this area. In terms of, I think it's 84, unless you're aware of two others that have been placed today, Justin, I don't have that information, but yesterday it was 84. And I can categorically state that my team and the school admissions team in the Education Authority are working night and day on this to ensure that those 84 children are placed. We have not stopped. We're working weekends, we're working late nights, myself included, to ensure that those children get a place. So we are on this full time.
Okay. Justin, that's 6 minutes if you want to make a very concise closing comment, thanks.
Just best luck with your work. Hopefully that issue is, it's causing a lot of real concern for families and children, and really, to get that resolved will be very, very important promptly.
Thanks, Justin. Harvey, MLA, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all. Maybe you could tell me, preschools, I think you said, were down by 16. Is this as a result of falling preschool pupil numbers, or part of a broader trend, a difficulty in the sector?
I'm sorry, Harry, can you repeat the question for me? I didn't mention preschools just in my opening statement.
Okay. I thought I'd read somewhere preschools were down by 16. Are they not? No.
Chart. It'll be on the chart. It's on your wee chart.
I need to have a look at the figures that are there, because I don't think I have.
Yes, school enrolment in Northern Ireland, slide 2020-2021 key statistics says that funded preschool settings
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, got it. Sorry, I get it now. Yes, I've got it. Yes, I mean, that slide there was really just giving you an overview of our school estate, I suppose, and the number of different types of facility that we have. So area planning, the sustainable schools policy only covers primary school and post-primary school, so hence my confusion. Yes, I mean, the preschools go down, they are flexed. You'll be aware that we have statutory and voluntary provision at preschool, so it is flexed in every year in line with the demographics. So our population, if you think about the sort of that compulsory preschool age of 3 years old, goes up and down every year in local areas. So we need to be able to flex the provision in order to provide, but there is a preschool place for every parent and child who wants it.
Right, that's good, that's great. And listen, maybe you could tell me, how many schools are currently at risk of closure?
I don't think that I could give a figure on anyone being at risk of closure, because area planning, as I said, looks at far more solutions and should be working in with schools that are at risk of being unsustainable. So there's a lot of factors to take into account, and the answer to unsustainability isn't necessarily a school closure.
Okay. I was just wondering, is there a policy, like how long does a school under threat remain so before a decision would be taken? Is there a time frame there?
We wouldn't have a policy on a time frame there, no.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Harry, if I could come in there and just say, I think that's where it's important that governors and the principal and others within the school are aware and cognizant of where there may be challenges, because that's where it's important to have those early conversations and engagement, rather than possibly burying the heads and thinking that things will go away and that things will get better. It's good to have the conversations, be aware of the challenges that are out there, and look, are there other creative and innovative ways that can address the challenges that are there. So I think that early engagement and ownership in many ways of what the challenges would be at a local school level is important as part of the overall process.
Yep, that's 100%, Jerry. Yep. Thank you very much for that. And thank you all. Thanks for the time, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Harry. Daniel McCrossan, MLA, for no more than 4 minutes, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay now? Yes?
And yes, go.
Yeah, the signal has been quite bad. It's coming and going here, so just bear with me a slight second. Continuing with the theme of special schools and the meeting and meeting the area planning needs of our vulnerable children, does the area planning process take into account the need for specialist teachers to be available in sufficient numbers to populate the classrooms? And further to that, as we all want the best for our children, workforce planning must play some part in the special school scenario. Would the witnesses agree with that? And further to that, do EA and DE have any plans to ask the ETI to evaluate the effectiveness of the emergency provision EA is currently putting in place to accommodate hundreds of SEN children this year? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Michelle, you want to come in on that? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I can certainly start by saying that to answer your last question first, Daniel, yes, ATI are going to undertake a review of the specialist provisions that have been established, and that's in conjunction with us. So we absolutely need to look at that. So yes, that is in train, and we're working to move that very quickly. Workforce planning absolutely has to be a factor here, and we're very heartened by the recruitment that has taken place for our special schools this last few months, and the availability of specialist provision teachers who are specially trained. But it's obviously an area that we need to work in, and we need to work very closely with our universities in this space. So yes, it will have to factor in as part of the process. Okay,
thank you. And Chair, just if I have a kind of very brief question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's just to further on this as well, and the thing knocked me out for about 10 minutes. It was difficult to get back in. Considering the importance of area planning, has there been consultation with key stakeholders, including schools, in recent times about their opinion of the effectiveness and relevance of area planning in their particular area? And further to that, have you done the same for other stakeholders such as parents and pupils?
Daniel, can I just ask, is that in relation to the special schools area planning or generic mainstream area planning?
Yeah, that's more generic, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. So, I mean, I'm happy to take that. In terms of consultation, the strategic area plan sets out at a strategic level what's going to happen over the next 5 years. It's then accompanied by a series of action plans which set out at an operational level what's going to happen. So consultation, EA consult on the strategic area plan, and Michelle will come in, I'm quite sure, in a minute about this one, but each solution in an area is heavily consulted on. And the statutory objection period provides the period where anyone can put in their thoughts or feelings around any proposal for any school in any area. So I think there's a lot of consultation out there. But Michelle, do you want to say something around the next strategic area plan and consultation?
Excuse me, please. I think yes, Chris, you've already asked for the time frame around this, but we're now at the stage where we're going to be moving to consultation on the next strategic area plan, and the details around that. I mean, it starts in terms of the baseline, statutory baseline report, and moving through workshops and working with the department very, very closely. But then we move into all of our key stakeholders, and a bit like the conversation earlier on, it's really important when we engage in that stakeholder discussion, because we want optimum buy-in and optimum participation in that. So in the early autumn of this year, we will move to the non-school and school stakeholder engagement, and then to make sure that schools have an opportunity to engage with us appropriately, we will be moving into November and January then for the consultation processes on the strategic area plan, but it's a key part of the process moving forward.
Okay, Daniel, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, members, that is all questions. Folks, thanks very much indeed for your engagement today. I'm sorry that the timings were so short, and obviously this is an issue that we'd like to return to you on in due course, but thank you for all the work that you're doing and all the matters that we've raised. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove witnesses and add members back into the spotlight, and ask the clerk to summarise any actions resulting from the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think to begin with, it would be helpful if the witnesses could share with the committee the briefing papers from EA and CCMS that were read today. There was a lot of material in there that will be useful to members. And then obviously the policy is still developing on foot of consultation and various stages of that. So I think the committee should write and ask for an update on the finalised policy on resetting area planning. There was one specific question, I think it was you yourself, Chair, in relation to North Belfast special needs provision. But that's all I have. Does anyone have additional questions to go in correspondence, members?
Any other additional questions or comments, members, or content with those? Obviously, it's an issue that we'll want to return to at a future date. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Thanks, Clark. We'll move then to agenda item 9, which is our briefing from SIA on the post-results service this year. Can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove all members from the spotlight and to add our witnesses? Can I refer members to a briefing paper from SIA at page 528 of your packs, and a briefing paper from the Northern Ireland Teaching Council and tabled papers? Can I welcome Margaret Farragher, interim CEO of SIA, I think, Amanda Swan, temporary director of examinations. I also thought I was welcoming Tommy O'Reilly, chairperson for SIA, and Michael McCauley, business manager for SIA, but Margaret, you may or may not be able to correct me in that regard, and I'll hand over to you given our short time this morning, and apologise for that. We're really grateful for your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think we've got Michael McCauley perhaps waiting in the background, so I don't know if it's possible to let him in. And apologies, Tommy O'Reilly is running a little late from another engagement, so I think he will join us, but I can make a start with the opening statement. Oh, here he is. Right on you.
Sorry, sure. You're okay. And I'm sure your statement will be very concise, but just in case it isn't, if you could keep it as brief as possible, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so let's get started then. So look, I'll provide a quick report on each of the areas and get over and done with it, and then we'll get into the questions. Okay. So since we last met on the 2nd of June, we've completed work on the 5-step process for the summer 21 awarding arrangements. And I can confirm that all A-level, ASs, GCSEs and other qualification grades were submitted by respective deadlines. By the 4th of June, we received over 232,000 grades, an immense achievement and testament to the hard work of the teaching professionals. Other key work included training sessions in terms for the review stage. Last Friday, we commenced the final stage of Step 4, which is the awarding of the grade processes, and this will continue to be our focus towards the issue of results on the 10th and 12th of August 2021. In terms of Step 5, which is the post-result service, right? At our last meeting, we provided a high-level overview of the 2 stages of the post-result service, and that we plan to release the information by 7th of June. I can confirm that the result of the post-result service process for Head Centre guidance was published on the 7th of June, alongside the Centre policy template and a detailed student and parent guide on the service. The free post-result service will open from Tuesday the 10th of August, in line with the release of the AS and A-level results. A priority appeals service will also be available to those students that are awaiting a university place. To further support this process, this year we've completed an extensive training programme for 225 examination officers from all Northern Ireland schools and colleges, as well as independent reviewers. We've continued our ongoing engagement with stakeholders, such as the fortnightly principal update meetings, interaction with students and parents, and regular engagement with teaching unions. This will continue throughout the final stages and into the next year. The committee have also asked for a further update on the Centre Determined Grades policies, and I understand an analysis of the review exercise has been included in your briefing pack. Due to the time available, I'll just provide a short summary, and my colleagues will be happy to answer any questions. As mentioned in our last meeting, as Chair, I was pleased to report that all 283 Centre Determined Grade policies fully complied with the requirements laid out in the Head Centre's guidance. To break this down further, 73% met the criteria at the first review, 25% by the second, and the 2% by the third review. There were 3 main areas that required a small percentage of centres to review their policies. Additional detail on evidence used to determine centre determined grades, the inclusion of internal deadlines, and no reference to training support and guidance. But overall, the majority of centre policies met the criteria by the first stage, a really successful result. I'd like to take the opportunity to again commend the hard work of the teaching community and also express my appreciation for the cooperation and patience that was afforded to SIA as we work together in the 5 stages this year. Turning to the Deloitte report, the committee also asked to provide an update on our target activities and the lessons learned from 2021. As the committee is aware, the Department of Education commissioned an independent review of the 2020 awarding arrangements, with the report published in January this year. In response to the findings, we developed an action plan with learning incorporated into this year's work where appropriate. I can report today that of the 28 actions, 15 are complete, 13 ongoing. These ongoing actions primarily relate to continuous work that include engagement with stakeholders, communication, guidance and support. Activities that we will continue until the Summer 21 series is complete. There's a lot of detail included in the written briefing to the committee, and we will be happy to provide any further detail in our responses. In terms of the 2022 awarding arrangements, at our last meeting on the 2nd of June, we set out the key elements of the assessment arrangements, the options available, and how students' overall grades will be awarded. Since then, we've released a short video, an example for students setting out how this will work in practice. Further support materials and subject level guidance will be released by 1 September 2021. Sure, we're further ahead in terms of assessment arrangements than other jurisdictions, and we hope this earlier release has helped schools and colleges to prepare for the next academic year. We believe that the arrangements help ensure that no student is disadvantaged and allows SAIL to deliver on the Education Minister's planned return to public examinations. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the feedback and some concerns from some schools and colleges in relation to the assessment arrangements. We are engaging with teachers at subject level in relation to those concerns and what further support we can provide. However, we continue to be mindful of the public health situation over the next 12 months and what would happen if this was to deteriorate. And at the same time, we must ensure SAIL qualifications retain their value and portability, which enables students to progress to the next stage of their journey. It's important to highlight that our approach to 21-22 is optional. Students have the option to sit all units if public health restrictions permit, and they will be awarded the best grade from full completion of the qualification or the alternative route of required units. There are many more elements to this process, so please do ask any questions you may have. Thank you, Chair, for your patience, and we're happy to respond to any of your questions.
Thanks for that, Tommy. I think we've got an absolute maximum of 4 minutes per member here, so I'll try and be as concise as I can. Thank you for that update. My understanding is that the Minister had pledged to take a look at awarding arrangements for maths, science and languages. There was a concern in relation to the lack of modification in GCSE maths. Has any review or change taken place in relation to that matter?
Yeah, I'll kick off with this one. Thank you, Chair. So I understand that the Minister has responded to a question on this that came through the Assembly questions. So my understanding is that the Minister is satisfied with all the work that SAIL has undertaken in terms of the arrangements for 2022. So that is my understanding of the response from the Minister.
Okay. Maybe some other members can ask supplementaries in relation to some of these questions that I don't quite have time to do. But the other concerns were in relation to the omission of orals and practicals in languages and sciences. So how has SAIL considered and acted on the concerns and advice of subject experts from local universities and schools in relation to the allowed omission of speaking across GCSE, AS and A-level modern languages in summer 22?
Yeah, okay. If I start with this one, as we've said, we've had correspondence from some centres about the omissions and those specific subjects that you mentioned, Chair. However, we have taken a lot of time since the feedback has come in to respond in detail to their feedback. I think as we've spelt out in the written briefing, I do think the proposals for 2022 are very positive for students taking examinations in Northern Ireland. There is a considerable reduction in assessment, whilst also retaining the confidence of universities across the UK and the South. So it's really important that we manage all the different stakeholders who have a view of the qualification arrangements. And as you know, in legislation, we do need to ensure that our qualifications are considered equivalent to other qualifications taken in the other parts of the UK. So to safeguard the progression opportunities for students in Northern Ireland, it's been really important to come up with an arrangement, which really has their interests at the heart. And I do think the 2022 proposal will do that. I think when we see other jurisdictions' proposals, and I think England are launching a consultation at the end of this week, I think, again, I hope that the sector and those schools that have written into us will be encouraged by the arrangements that we have in Northern Ireland. And also, I think the fact that we were able to announce the arrangements early enables schools to do their planning and prepare for the next academic term. So overall, I think the arrangements are the right way forward.
Okay, and so you don't think that there should be modifications to language literature instead, given that the skill of writing is covered in other assessment units, whilst speaking is not?
No, we don't think that the omissions should be changed for languages. We did spell out when we were last here all the issues around the public health concerns, all the feedback that we had in the consultation that took place earlier this academic year, all the challenges around conducting those speaking assessments. There is quite a lot of evidence around the stress and anxiety that the oral assessments cause students. We've tried to ensure that the arrangements for 2022 do not need to change later in the year to give schools certainty and enable them to withstand any more disruption.
Okay, and you don't think this approach will have an adverse impact on the uptake of modern languages at key transition points?
I really don't think it will. I mean, we do have a job of work to do with the sector to encourage greater take-up of languages, and I'm really pleased, that I know that we do have the support of the sector and of subject experts from Queen's to carry on with that work. So it's really important that we continue to take that forward. If students want to do the oral assessments, they absolutely can. And I think our guidance in the written briefing shows that if they take all of the qualification, they will be awarded the best grade from either route.
Okay, I'm over time. So my final concise question is that it's my understanding that life and health sciences were permitted to retain practicals, but chemistry, biology and physics were not. Could you comment on the rationale for that, if that's the case?
Yeah, so I might bring Michael in here, but I think that the issue is really that they are different specifications, so they are structured differently. So for the sciences, it was absolutely the right thing to do to have the practical assessments as the optional assessment. That does lead to a dramatic reduction in assessment time for the sciences without compromising any of the important elements in terms of biology, chemistry and physics. Michael, I don't know if you want to come in with any other information.
Yeah, I think, Chris, on that point, that the way the qualifications are structured are very, very different. There are 14 units in the A-level life and health science qualification, and the way that the A-level chemistry, physics and biology qualifications work, the 3 units at AS and 3 units at A2 that are compulsory. That's not the case in life and health sciences, where there are an awful lot of optional units. And also as well, the focus of that qualification is very much coursework based, so we're not comparing apples with apples in those instances. So it was a case of us allowing a retention of a degree of coursework in the life and health science qualification for those very reasons. We wanted to ensure that candidates did have an opportunity to demonstrate their skills in that area, and it does set apart from the other 3 in terms of its structure because of the optional routes through the qualification, the optional units, and the number of different specialist units within it.
Okay, allow me to bring in other members. Pat Sheehan, MLA, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to everyone this morning. I agree with the principle that a language is nothing unless it's spoken, and it's puzzling me still that the oral aspect of the courses has been omitted. Is there any potential that could be changed in the time ahead?
Shall I start and Michael? Yeah. So I think Pat, as we've outlined, we did receive considerable feedback when we managed the public consultation back in the early part of the academic year around the challenges with assessing the speaking component. And we do have to ensure, I think, that the arrangements that are put in place can withstand further disruption. And we just don't know where this pandemic will go. If we were to omit another unit and then not be able to undertake the speaking components, that would considerably devalue the languages qualifications. I really do think that by having an optional unit admission policy, students that want to take the oral component can, and then they can see how they perform, and they will automatically get the better grade. And of course, with this policy, all the content should still be covered, and all the skills still need to be covered. And I know that college and school leaders do have that message, so I really don't think that there'll be less teaching of speaking or less speaking going on in languages lessons because of this optional unit admission approach.
Okay. Well, it's not a decision I agree with, but I'm going to leave it there for now, given the shortage of time this morning. Can I ask officials to elaborate on the appeals process for this year in terms of the scope for appeal and also the time frame? Because given the deadlines that will face students in terms of admissions to further and higher education, it's important that those time frames and how long the appeals process will take are communicated clearly. Can you tell us what's happening in regard to that? Thanks.
I'll get Amanda to pick that up for you.
Okay, thank you for that question, Pat. So this year, we have an appeals process. Students will be able to appeal on the grounds of an administrative error, either at SIA or in their centre. They can appeal on the basis that their school didn't follow their procedure. And I think most importantly, and what's different from last year, is that they can appeal if they believe that there has been an unreasonable academic judgment from their school. I think things to note that for this year, the appeals are free for all students. It is a really big plus of the appeal system this year that the academic judgment of their work can be reviewed by SIA, and that can come to us very quickly, and that there is a consistent process across awarding bodies. We do have a priority service operating for students who are waiting on university places. This year, we have also worked with UCAS to make sure that they can provide us with up-to-date live data on students that are not placed or that are waiting on the result of one of our reviews in order to get placed. So I think we've taken all steps that we possibly can to make that as smooth as possible. We have also trained and recruited many more reviewers than we actually believe that we need to make sure that we have plenty of flexibility within the system to make sure that we hit those dates. So the priority service will open on A-level results day, and I'm confident that we will meet the dates for those priority services to make sure that the initial appeal is closed out, before the UCAS deadlines close.
And are you confident that every student will have his or her appeals process finished before the deadline for admissions to universities or further education?
Yes, as long as they highlight to us that it is a priority review coming through to SIA. So our whole process and structure has been built around it has to be a no-fail deadline. That deadline has to be met. And and if that means our teams having to work over August bank holidays and work weekends, Sundays, that will happen. That it has to be met if it's within our power to do it.
And that's part of the reason why all the schools have been trained as well, so that they know that those priority cases get pushed to the fore, get pushed to the front, and get in the SIA so we can get them addressed quickly.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Pat. Can I bring in Diane Dodds, MLA, please?
Thank you for that. Just one question. I may have picked this up wrong. The other 4 nations of the United Kingdom, where are they in announcing what they're going to do for exam processes in 2022? And are we sure, for example, that the issue that has been highlighted around languages and the lack of oral examination in languages will make our exam results as equally portable as they should be right across the system? I'm thinking particularly for people who will apply and use that for applications for different jurisdictions within the United Kingdom. That's the first element of this. The second element of it, last year there was an incredible hassle around the A-level results, the issue of young people not knowing where they're going. Are we sure? Are we absolutely sure that the processes that we have in place are adequate to ensure that young people quickly and efficiently will be able to use all of their results in clearing to get those university places that they will need?
Okay, so I'll start. So thank you, Diane, for those questions. So in terms of the other jurisdictions, I think they're still in the process of working it through. I think I can say that safely on behalf of Scotland, Wales and England. I know that Wales managing feedback at the moment, and England is yet to launch a consultation, so that will be happening at the end of this week. So if you think about it, in England, school term does finish later than here in Northern Ireland, but I think we've probably all noticed the concerns in England about teachers not yet knowing what the plan for 2022 is in terms of planning their teaching for the next academic term. So it is incredibly positive, I think, that since the 17th of May we have had clarity on the way forward. School and college leaders were very clear with us that they did want that clarity. In terms of portability, we've worked incredibly hard since August, June of last year, to engage with all the higher education bodies, so they're different representative bodies, the professional, statutory, regulatory bodies such as the General Medical Schools Council, to ensure that they are confident with our approach. And that's why it is really important that we do make sure that these unit emissions do not lead to further changes taking place later on in the academic year should there be further disruption, which is why we've taken the care to ensure that the units that are put forward for emission are ones likely to be affected by further disruption. And also that really important message about all the content, all the knowledge, understanding and skills still being taught to the best of the ability of all our centres in Northern Ireland. That is also really important in terms of ensuring portability. And then on your third point, which was around confidence about the A-level grades being able to be used in the university admissions process and through clearing, I think absolutely. We're not envisaging any sort of points of disruption. At our end, we're working very hard to ensure that everything is being, well progressed in terms of the issue of results on the 10th of August for A-level.
I think it's also fair to say that we're also working with the local universities and also with the Department for the Economy, just to make sure that there are no blockages in the system, and those discussions are going on at the moment.
Thanks, Diane. That's 4 minutes if you want to make a quick closing comment.
No, it's just one. I mean, I tend to agree that a language is nothing if it's not a spoken language, and I just need to make sure that our young people will be able to, and their achievements will be equally portable across the United Kingdom. If, for example, England decides to go for an oral element of that examination, I think the worst thing that we could do is, one, disadvantage our young people, or two, tell them this is the way forward and then change our minds in September or October. I don't want that as a process. So I'm just, that we're, to be sure, at this stage is really the important thing on that one. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Diane. Appreciate that robust questioning. Can I bring in Daniel McCrossan for no more than 4 minutes? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our guests today for being with us. It's good to see you. I'll just go straight to questions. This committee and many MLAs have been overwhelmed by communication from schools, teachers, parents and pupils complaining about the changes made to the grade of warning arrangements for next year. Subjects such as science, maths, geography are being flagged up, and CA's justification for dropping practical science assessments is based upon the prospect of a further deterioration in the public health situation. So with that in mind, is it not the case that the vaccination programme, including the prospect of booster shots, will have been completed well before the assessments will be required? And further to that, this being the case, the disaster that CIA alludes to is really a remote prospect, is it not? And finally, should you not sit down with your colleagues in other jurisdictions, similarly what Diane has pointed out, and rethink the situation? The fact that you have all made the same poor judgment call as you all did last year when you relied on algorithms that failed our children miserably is no real vindication of answer to this stage.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think when we were here last, we did talk about the extensive engagement that we had with the sector in coming up with the unit of emissions approach, and all the work we've done with principals since last summer and throughout the year. Hopefully, Daniel, I've clarified that, we've taken great care to omit units which we think could be at risk next year. We also have to think very carefully about the spread of assessment objectives and not omitting too much of the qualification, because that would absolutely undermine the value of the qualifications in the future. We've heard from UCAS that by the time the GCSE students in 2022 are applying for university in 2024, there'll be nearly 1 million applicants for university. We've got about 650,000 now. So it is really important that we balance the reduction in assessment very carefully with not undermining the value of the qualifications. So I do think that we have done that in the right way, based on all the conversations we've had with the HE sector and with the teaching profession. I know that we've also received the correspondence that you've probably received, and we will continue to work with those centres to support them.
Margaret, could I come in there just to a point on the science qualifications? We are very well aware of, obviously the success of the vaccination programme. But I think over the last number of days, you've seen the number of cases here double, for example, from 211 cases on the 28th of June to 420 on the 5th of July. We have anecdotal evidence of the numbers of children having to self-isolate in schools towards the end of term increasing. And if we even look at England, there were 375,000 children self-isolating last week, which is 1 in 20, and 7,000 in Liverpool alone. So it would be remiss of us to ignore those stats for the 2021-22 academic year. COVID-19 is totally unpredictable, as we've all seen. But in terms of the sciences, Daniel, with the removal, and I think particularly a lot of the focus from teachers and heads of department in the correspondence that we've received has been around double award science. Now, the optional unit for admission is the practical. Now, that accounts for 4.5 hours of assessment. It is quite a substantial amount of assessment being removed from the qualification. There are a total of 11 hours within that qualification, and we are allowing schools and students the option to remove 4.5 of those from the qualification. And it's also important to remember that double award science is, there are 2 GCSEs available for that, and there are allocations of twice the amount of teaching time for that qualification as well. So we believe it is fair. It allows us to ensure that examinations will go ahead and that we can absorb a good degree of disruption next year. And we do think that it does give students the opportunity to progress because they will have the option to take the practical assessments if indeed they wish. And we are encouraging schools to ensure that they are still exposed to the knowledge, skills and the practical concepts that would be associated with those assessments.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel, I'm sorry, that's 4 minutes. I have 4 members for 10 minutes here, so if you can make a really concise closing remark, please. Thanks.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming in, because I was going to say Margaret didn't touch on it, but you've addressed it now. But there are major proposals to change how children are required to isolate, which will reduce the number required to isolate. This is going ahead in England, as already outlined earlier this week. It is a fluid situation. I appreciate there's no blueprint and certainly nothing to refer to, because it's such an ever-changing situation. But I do know that this is causing huge amounts of concern, and that's been fed back to us as MLAs and certainly as members of this committee.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel. Robbie Butler, MLA, please. Thanks. Robbie, I think you might be on mute. Apologies.
Yeah, you can add that to my time. Thanks, Chair. I'll go straight to the questions. The first one, Margaret, I've communicated with you and you have been of assistance with regard to this issue. So it's regard to special education needs kids who have additional needs and reasonable adjustments in terms of how they're going to be assessed for their grades. Can you just outline to us what guidance was given to schools, because I do believe it's schools then that obviously perhaps make those assessments, and how will it be applied to individual people?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Robbie, for the question. So in the guidance that we launched on the 5th of March, We included a section on ensuring that access arrangements could take place in the usual way. We also launched our technical questions and answers, which we kept really as a live document. So as we received more questions from teachers and school and college leaders, we updated the guidance. So there are a significant number of examples in that technical Q&A guide demonstrating how reasonable adjustments could be made and access arrangements. As you know as well, I think, Robbie, we've had fortnightly sessions with the principals since December, so we've been able to respond to any questions that they have had throughout the process. And in terms of the numbers of access arrangements recorded, I'm pleased to say that the numbers are very similar to any other year when we would hold examinations. So I do think that area of the process has gone smoothly.
Can I just come in there as well, Margaret? Yeah. Robbie, access arrangements is such an important area. For schools, we actually provide yearly training on that to examination officers and anyone else who requires it, to make sure that they understand the full range of access arrangements that are available, including modifications to examination papers, for example, in Braille. And also then, the access arrangements that can happen while assessments are happening. So it is an area that gets focused every year, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. And, examination officers would be really well versed in those areas, with guidance from ourselves and also guidance from JCQ. And it's the same guidance that has gone out across all awarding organisations.
Yeah, no problem, and I appreciate that. And there's good work over the years. Just like this year, I think, in terms of the impact on our young people and children, those probably, with the maybe perhaps were affected more. And I just wanted to make sure that it's robust and its application is fair, and that schools have that. And the second question, then, Chair, the Minister alluded to additional support, particularly around subjects like mathematics, I believe. So, has there been anything constructed with regard to additional support for examinations? And if so, what was it, and who was consulted in the construct?
Okay, so
the instruction was that we would produce some sort of aid for students doing maths. Now, the one that was put out for last January was turned around really quickly, so now we've had more time to think about it. So we have taken feedback from teachers. We have met, which I think is most importantly, with a subgroup of GCSE maths students that would have just done year 12 and the ones that are doing year 11, to actually look at ideas to make that aid as user-friendly as possible. So we're actually working up a sample one to go back to that same group of individuals, hopefully to have that reviewed. So we are doing as much as we humanly can to make sure that aid is as user-friendly as possible for the students.
Brilliant, that would be useful. I think in terms of closing that circle, getting back to those that were consulted would be really useful. I know you've said that, so that's good to hear. Thank you very much, guys, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Robbie. 3 minutes 58 seconds. Outstanding. Start for Robbie Butler today. Okay. Nicola Brogan, MLA, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and outdo Robbie here too. Thanks everybody for your presentations there. Just, I want to make one quick comment about the oral exams, that part being removed from GCSEs. I've heard the same calls from lots of teachers and students, and it does put many at a disadvantage, and even the teachers' unions have said the same thing. So I think it's something that does need to be addressed, but I'll not dwell on it because I know you've already discussed it. One topic I want to kind of focus on is about schools and colleges and the kind of resources or capacity they have. Do you think they have the capacity to process, probably it was likely going to be multiple appeals within the time frame that was discussed already?
I think, Nicola, when we have been designing that process, we have tried to make it as simple as possible for schools to make sure they can turn them around really quickly. We have provided really clear guidance of the parameters of what schools have to do. We've provided templates for what the schools have to do. We have provided sample policies for schools for what they have to do. So the actual element of the school check should be very straightforward and quick, because in essence what the schools are checking are they have not made any administrative errors. and they have followed their own procedure. Now the work will actually move to SIA when we will have the opportunity then to consider if academic judgments were reasonable or not on candidates' work. So, a huge part of the workload has moved from the schools, what would have been in schools last year, over to SIA. But I think that is the right thing to do, because we can then independently review the academic judgments made in the school or any other issues the student might feel is there.
And just to add, I mean, we've had very positive feedback from teacher unions that they think the preparation for the post-result service has gone very well. So they're not anticipating a lot of burden in the summer holidays, which is really positive. So hopefully, SIA will pick up the work there.
And Nicola, the Minister for Education has previously made an announcement about some additional resources required for schools to help them with the appeal process if necessary. So there's a number of measures all being put in place to support schools through this process.
That's good, Tommy. I'm glad that the resources will be made available. And you're right, Margaret, the unions have been positive about that, and that is a positive thing. So not to be pessimistic, but do you think that schools and colleges, and maybe not if SIA are going to kind of take the lead on this, but do you think schools and colleges should have contingency plans in place in case, in the case that parents might kind of take legal action against the school because of either delays to appeals or because the outcome affected a child's place within a university, or meaning they didn't get a place within a university?
I mean, I think the process is designed that it should help ensure that the appeals are progressed as quickly as possible. I think there is protection to schools this year, if there is a legal challenge. Hopefully SIA can help resolve any issues that arise. It was very difficult last year because it wasn't based on evidence. The grades weren't based on evidence. But I do get the sense from centres that they do feel more comfortable with the arrangements this year and have confidence in the system.
And can they be confident then that they have your backing as well? That they don't need their own contingency plans?
Well, I think they believe that the system has been designed in a fair way. So students have that, fair opportunity to challenge their grades, but they can see that SIA will also be fair in terms of how we work with the information put forward by centres.
I mean, the reality is the schools will do their bit. We just check in the admin and check in that procedures have been followed, and then that passes to SIA. And from that point on, it's SIA's decisions about whether the admin's right, whether the procedures have been followed, and then obviously if we're looking at the academic judgment piece too. So I do think we are taking a lot away from schools this year in terms of the responsibility for seeing work through, which I think is a good thing.
And schools will be concerned, will always be concerned that they're going to face legal challenges. Okay, all we can do is ensure that they feel that they're being supported and the right processes are in place, and that's what we're doing. And we're working with them very closely. Hopefully that issue will not materialise as an issue for them.
Okay, Nicola?
Yeah, hopefully not, it's right, but no, that does sound positive. So thanks for that. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola. Justin McNulty, please.
Sure, thanks, folks. Guys, back to the languages piece. Teachers, principals, pupils, students, speakers are gobsmacked at the decision to remove the oral aspect of the languages assessment. And you've said you've had support in this decision from QUB and UU. I'm just a bit concerned about that statement. I'm not sure that stands up, because I don't think there has been any academic support for that decision. Folks, you just clarify that for me, please.
Yeah, I'll come in there, Justin. So I think I mentioned universities support the approach. So we do have to think about the 144 universities that operate across the UK, and then the other universities that operate in the south. We work very closely with the team that manage admissions in QUB, but obviously there's a separate department that oversees modern languages. And I know that team has been really concerned about the take-up of languages, and they have written to SIA with their concerns. They were worried, I think, that the optional unit admission, being the oral unit, could have a detrimental effect on the take-up of languages. But we have, taken the time to work with those colleagues to explain to them, the rationale for that unit being the unit that was put forward for omission. It is an optional omission. Students can continue to take the oral assessment and they will get the better grade of either route. And we're really keen to work with that team in terms of encouraging the take-up of languages. There's so much work that we want to be doing in terms of Key Stage 3. We've got some exciting projects around, assessment and quizzes to get young people excited about languages, looking at vocational languages qualifications and the important employment pathways that languages provide. So we do, I hope, as soon as we can move on from COVID, really need to put our energy into that work with all the, the expertise that we have in terms of languages in Northern Ireland.
Okay, I'm all for getting children and young people excited about languages. I'm still trying to comprehend the rationale behind the decision to remove the oral element of the assessment on languages, because if you can't speak a language, what's the point in having it? You know your verbs, you can know all the grammatical details, but if you don't know how to speak it, it's irrelevant. And just tell me, what was the rationale for removing the oral part of the language assessment? Was it PHA guidance, or what was the rationale?
Yeah, so again, I guess just to come, I know Michael wants to come in, but just to come back to the really important point that speaking will obviously still be taught as part of languages. That is absolutely essential. So, we would obviously expect languages lessons to be conducted in the relevant language. In terms of the feedback that we had earlier on in the academic year, there were huge logistical issues with the conducting the oral assessments, concern about learners who come from disadvantaged backgrounds in particular, being able to perform well in those oral assessments. And we've had to ensure that the arrangements for 2022 can withstand any further disruption next year. So that's why it's the oral assessment, and also ensuring that important point that other colleagues made earlier on. We do need to ensure these qualifications are portable and credible. So, but Michael, I think, wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, Justin, I think it's important to note that the decisions around languages has really evolved. Last year, when we actually had our consultation in September about assessment arrangements for this summer prior to cancellation of exams, we had actually proposed that there would be no omissions in the languages qualifications. Now, we obviously then were inundated with a lot of correspondence from schools, from teachers, from parents who were very, very frustrated that the languages qualifications weren't having any options of an omission applied, and the overwhelming suggestion from them was actually the oral or the speaking assessments. Now, over last October, what we did was we announced that they would actually be assessed via endorsement, so it would be a teacher assessed component. But again, schools were very, very frustrated with that. It limited access to grades because that is an untiered unit. So this time round, it was very much a case of us, okay, we want to ensure that we can deliver qualifications next year and can withstand a deterioration in the public health situation, but we are very conscious of the demand within the system that they can still do oral assessments if they wish. We have absolutely accommodated that with these arrangements and given schools the option to assess the speaking element if they so wish, and if a candidate does wish to be assessed within that. I think it's also important to note as well, like with obviously the closure of schools from March to June last year, and also as well from January to Easter this year, like one of the comments coming through in last year's consultation was the fact that the children were going to be out of practice of speaking because it is primarily done in the classroom. Would that then affect their performance in an assessment? So it is very, very important that we take all those viewpoints on board. And also as well, like we have had, and it's important to acknowledge, we have had positive feedback from schools about the decision we've taken around orals, where it is accepted. They completely understand the approach that we're taking and the reasons that we're taking it.
Okay.
Justin, I'm going to have to interrupt. Apologies. I think our Starleaf capacity is going to draw to a close here. Apologies. Thanks for those robust questions. The clerk will obviously follow those up in written format as well. Do you want to try a concise closing comment, Justin?
Well, the reduction in content for Irish in terms of the oral aspect, it doesn't stand up because there's no reduction in GCSE math, for example, because it doesn't follow through that students can study maths and then move into A-level with not having reached the base level that they need to do A-level maths. So it just there's inconsistencies there, guys, which don't really stand up to scrutiny.
So, Chair, so maybe we'll do, Chair, in the interest of time, we'll write back to Justin on that issue in terms of that specific question around the maths. And
yes, CC on that. Okay. Thanks very much indeed to CA witnesses today. We'll obviously be engaging with you on these issues at a future date as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Have a nice holiday.
Thank you. Members, thank you. I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove witnesses, add members back into the spotlight to allow me to close the meeting. Any other business, members? No.
Enjoy the weekend, please.
Yeah, our next meeting is Wednesday, the 8th of September via Starleaf at 9:30 a.m. and we'll consider whether to facilitate that in hybrid format as well. Thank you, members.
Cheers, guys.
The meeting does now adjourn.